by telephone, video conferencing, or other electronic means to any council meeting as an electronic participation. Such council member listening via telephone or other electronic means shall be deemed present for purposes of determining a quorum. The member of city council may not participate nor vote in a quasi-judicial public hearing. However, the council member may maintain the electronic connections and monitor during the hearing. So the only limitations are quasi-judicial public hearings and executive sessions. Other than that, participating by telephone is deemed part of quorum.
We're live now on the.
Great. Thanks for that language, Attorney Brown. And that'll hopefully, that was actually on anyway. Appreciate that. So welcome everybody. This is the City Council special and regular meeting of Monday, August 17th, 2020. The time is 6:02. I'm, as a call to order, would like to ask everyone to please stand and give the Pledge of Allegiance when the flag is shared with all. And you can unmute and join me in this. Is there a flag
Hi,
yet?
Rita. This is Ryan.
Oh, there it is.
For the city.
Hi, Ryan.
Hey, so they were saying you're having some issues trying to call in.
Well, actually, it was calling in and trying to connect on my computer. And
for those watching right now, we're trying to connect Councilmember Russell via phone. I think we'll go ahead and still do the flag and the Pledge of Allegiance while they're trying to work out that technicality, but unmute yourself and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance once the flag is there we are. Great. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the
United States of
America
and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Will the clerk please take roll call verbally?
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Anderson.
Present.
Councilmember Cuesta.
Present.
Councilmember Russell. Mayor Pro Tem Sierra.
Present.
Councilmember Stone.
Present.
Councilmember Wink.
Present.
Mayor Olson.
Present.
6 present and 1 absent, the 1 absent being Councilmember Russell, but I know she's having technical difficulties and trying to get in.
Great. When you see her come in, Clerk Carlo, could you just announce her?
Yes, of course.
Feel free to interrupt.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Our first part of the meeting is our study session. Agenda item 4 and 4A is the Community Relations Coordinator Toni Arnoldy is here to discuss the nomination and celebration for the 2020 Citizen of the Year. Hi there, Toni. Unmute and give us your presentation of these 4 great members of our community.
So I wasn't exactly sure able to vote on a person tonight, and that I'll be revisiting in September. For that, we do have 4 awesome candidates, and I'm hoping that you all received information about each of them in your packets. We have Jan Brown, who is a nurse for many, many years and giving back to the community hugely since her retirement. We have Mr. David Carroll, who is currently the director of the Chamber of Commerce, that has served on many, many boards and is part of Museum of Outdoor Arts and the Cultural Arts Commission and many other great things in our city. Kyles Friedman is another Kyles, has also
Mayor Olson,
much like all of them.
I just wanted to announce
outstanding
Councilmember Russell.
volunteer in our
Right,
city.
thank you, Member Russell. Welcome. Sorry, Tony. Keep going. You're breaking out a bit, Tony. Or is it just me? Are you all seeing her breaking out as
No, I
well?
was wondering as well. She's breaking up on my end. And she's frozen right now.
So,
Mr. Friedman has
I wonder if we should,
Mayor,
yeah,
point of information. So we have the printout from and
Yeah.
all of the information submitted. So I don't really think it's really helping or doing anything. I mean, I appreciate Tony and I love hearing Tony participate, but I think we've got the information on the 4 candidates, and maybe it's even better to have an unbiased, approach to it in terms of just what we see from the different
that
individuals.
sounds great.
Yeah. So
I
maybe.
think so too. Are you all ready to just move forward with the discussion then? Yes, great. Sorry,
Sorry,
Tony, you're frozen totally. So we're just going to go ahead and discuss the 4. Folks, tonight we won't necessarily vote on this, but I'd like to get a consensus where we would move one forward then to bring to the meeting. Is that correct, how we're doing that? Clerk Carlisle, is that how we would do it?
Yes.
All right, so 4 great candidates, as Tony was trying to tell us.
Am I back?
So I think the first question we have got to answer is, are we going to move forward with this to actually pick one and do some kind of a celebration? And then secondly, which one would we choose to move forward? So Member Wink, you're first up.
Do you want to do this in 2? Thank you, Mary. Should we do it in 2 sections? So shall I speak about the logistics about the celebration first before we talk about candidates, and we'll go around?
Sounds good.
Okay. So I believe that we should make the announcement of Citizen of the Year without delay. I think we should absolutely publish.
Can you all hear me again?
Yes, Tony, we can hear you, but we've decided to go ahead and just have the conversation. We've all read the packet and know all the 4 candidates really well. We're just going to start moving forward on the decision, both about how to celebrate them and secondly, who to actually choose.
So I think we should absolutely make the announcement without delay. I think we should publish something about the candidate. Maybe if we can, 1 page, whatever works best. I do think a video celebration would be also really fun and a great tribute if we have the resources to make that happen. And then I feel that at a later date, when it's safer with coronavirus, we should definitely hold an in-person celebration as usual and present that individual with the plaque or what we typically present them with. So yeah, that's what I think should happen. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, Member Stone.
Thank you. I'm in complete agreement with Member Wink. Definitely want to get the announcement out as soon as possible and do an in-person celebration as soon as we can.
Thank you, Member Anderson.
Yeah, I have a question on how to go about the celebration. I didn't see this on here as an option, but is there any reason we couldn't do an outdoor celebration in person without too much delay? I mean, I think that's allowed under that kind of thing would be allowed under the governor's allowances for outdoor events. If we followed those particular rules, would that be possible? I'm not sure if that's a question for maybe City Attorney Brown.
Yeah, Attorney Brown, are you able to give us a
Matter of fact, I think we've got something up on the website as of last week about outdoor events and the limitations on outdoor events. Basically, as there is a cap on numbers, which I think is 175 total people, and everybody must be wearing a mask. And people have to stay 6 feet apart from each other, or in family groups 6 feet apart from each other.
So we can work out those kind of details, Member Anderson, but are you wanting to move forward?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I would definitely want to move forward, but I would, if it's possible to do an in-person celebration without too much delay in an outdoor setting, I would favor that over waiting a few months till it's kind of, we've kind of had to move past it. I think it would be kind of fall a little flat if we had to wait a while to do it. But regardless, I'm happy to move forward.
Others want to weigh in? Anybody in disagreement? Okay, Member Quest, I see you unmuted.
Sure. Yes, 4 great candidates here, and I'd like to proceed with a selection as well. We can figure out the details of how we go about giving them their proper accreditation with the award. And something virtual, if that's the best we can get to more immediately, I think is worthwhile. And then something a bit more formal whenever we can get it figured out. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks. Mayor Pro Tem Zero.
And I would agree with Member Cuesta where we do obviously make a selection and then do something virtual to begin with, and then maybe something outdoors once this passes.
All right, great. So and I agree with that too. So I think we're ready to move forward on doing it now.
Mayor, I just wanted to jump in. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Were you saying that you're going to actually select, get consensus of what to bring back, or I just want to make sure wasn't part of those discussions. I know that there can't be a vote tonight of who you would select as Citizen of the Year, but I wanted to just make sure we're all on the same page. There was a little bit of confusion there.
Yeah, so the second part of this conversation is picking the person and with consensus, and then have it brought forward.
Perfect. Okay. I just want to make sure I understood correctly what you were moving towards and that was correct.
Thanks for clarifying. Yeah, so it looks, so there had been a question earlier on whether we would continue doing this, and we just said we'd wait until we, get the nominations and see what we're going to do. But I think everybody's saying, yes, let's go ahead on this. So now, who would you like to choose out of these great 4 candidates? And first up is Member Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. As Tony mentioned, I was really excited to see all 4 of the candidates. I was glad we had 4, and I was grateful to see the community engagement and see who the community wanted to celebrate and support. 2 candidates immediately rose to the top, and then 1 stood out to me. So the one that stood out as the strongest, and I'm basing strength as a candidate in terms, or as a nominee in terms of the length of time for which they have contributed to the city, the breadth of ways in which they've contributed to the city of Englewood, the selflessness with which this individual does this work, and there's a particular passion and sense of duty that drives both of the top 2, but this particular individual in doing what they do for the city of Englewood. And so I would like to put forward Charles Friedman. I just think he's strongest. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Stone.
Thank you. I apologize. I'm going to speak kind of slowly. I had oral surgery a few days ago, and it's difficult to talk, so bear with me here. I fully support everything that Member Wink just said about Charles. I think Charles is a phenomenal human being who does great work in our community. I was also really excited to see Jan Brown's name on that list as well. I think that she's also a phenomenal human being who does a lot for our community. And I've been really torn between the 2 of them as far as which one that I'd like to see come out of this with our award. But I do think that Member Wink has a really good point about the breadth and scope of work that Mr. Friedman has engaged in our community, and just the sheer volume of citizens that he's interacted with and made a difference in their lives. So I'll also be supporting Charles for this.
Great, thank you. Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I looked at these candidates and was just really pleased. I mean, any one of them would make fantastic Citizens of the Year, and I really struggled, working through them, trying to think who I would support on this the most, and I kind of landed in the same place Member Wink, Member Stone did on Charles Friedman. I've just seen him interact in the communities in behind the scenes ways for many years, and in a number of different ways, from trash pickup to helping with many different homeless initiatives, and just taking a leadership role without, particularly worrying about, whether he gets recognized for it or not. And I think that's a real prime win here, is that this is somebody who is not out seeking Citizen of the Year or something. And I don't think any of the other ones are either. But the fact that he's so behind the scenes, I think, really sets him apart in a lot of ways. And so I'd see him get recognized in a way that I don't think he often gets recognized. And so I support him as well for Citizen of the Year.
Thank you. Councilmember Questa.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to turn up my volume here just a bit. Again, thank you, Mayor. And I think along the lines of what Member Anderson just stated, it's 4 tremendous choices. There's certainly not a wrong choice here. The only I think downside is that we can't give out 4. I think they're all great. There's been a good case made for Mr. Friedman, and he does tremendous work. And I think that there's something to be said about the unspoken nature of much of what he does. And Jan Brown has changed my perspective on many things that have come before council. I think she's a tremendously involved citizen, very thoughtful. And so I appreciate a lot of what she does. And again, she's really brought me clarity on a few things. I had never met Mr. Williamson, but I did check out the program that he has, where he does boxing mentoring for youth, and it's incredible. I was unaware of that, and it's something that I'll certainly pass along to other folks too, because that is incredibly commendable. I really like what he had there, and that is quite an offering to Inglewood's youth. David Carroll being the 4th nominee, and he's the one that stood out to me for the sole reason that, and I think it kind of trickles in with the thoughts on Mr. Friedman. What I think Mr. Carroll does in his involvement with ACE and in the Inglewood Chamber, it not only helps the businesses, but those employees, and then those offerings to the greater community as well. Now, it's certainly a more high-profile person, to be sure, and I think there might have been something of an entourage effect. He has a lot of support from, I think, even past Citizens of the Years I saw in his packet. So there were a lot of things that I saw in Mr. Carroll's that I thought that were really things that I would like to get behind. Having said that, I am more than happy to put that award in the hands of any of the other 3. Thank you, Mayor.
So is that your first choice then, or are you saying?
Yes, Mr. Carroll would be my first choice, but again, it's a 3-way tie for second, and I'm happy to put it in the hands of any of the others.
All right, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Sierra.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The great thing about this is that you get to see all the contributions from members of the community here. I've had the pleasure of meeting 3 of the 4 people. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Williamson, but I do recall him from his boxing days when he did fight. I think I recall his Klitschko fight back in the late 90s. But and I've also heard many great things about his boxing gym. I haven't had a chance to actually check it out just yet, but heard very positive things. So really happy with the program that he's running there. Ms. Jan Brown, obviously, I'm very familiar with and a big fan of hers and what she's doing for the community, especially on the environmental side. So I think for me, it did come down to 2 candidates. I had a tough time. There were 1A, 1B for me, and I kept going back and forth between the 2. And I guess, obviously, I've had a chance to work with Charles over the past couple of years. So just great things that he's doing for the community. So I don't have any issues moving forward with Charles here. But I also want to point out just some of the things that Mr. Carroll has done for the community over the past, especially around COVID, just the leadership role he took with the chamber, and just the early days of COVID where he was mobilizing and speaking to area businesses and how we can keep them up and running. And these were just in the first week, first days. He was out and about and working with staff, working with some of us on council. I was just really impressed with what he's done. And so to me, this is a very hard decision. I kept going back and forth, and I can go either way. I think I landed with Mr. Carroll being number 1 on my list, but I have, all the respect for Charles, and so I would not be, sad in the least in order to move forward with Childs as well, if that's the direction we decide to go. So just amazing work by all four of them, but definitely wanted to highlight some of the two.
Thank you. And Councilmember Russell, I think, is now successfully on by phone. All right, can you hear us?
Yes.
Great. Would you
Yes,
like to
can
weigh
you-
in?
I can weigh in. I did, I missed all the initial conversation, so I don't really know exactly what went on. I read all of the applications, and I'm a little bit disappointed. In none of the applications does it say how long anyone has actually lived here in the city. And I think that a lot of these people, although I do believe, there's good reasons to nominate them, have really not been in this community for very long, for, maybe several years at most, but it could be wrong. I guess what I am concerned about is I know that we have a lot of longtime residents that have lived in Inglewood for a long time. And I know there's some school teachers that have been in this community. They're now retired. They got great awards. And many of the citizens today went to school and they had a great impact. My concern is making someone that has not been here for a long period of time. And the truth is, I guess what has happened, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, in advertising this, and COVID-19 has impeded this somewhat, I believe there's a whole generation that probably did not get notified of all the changes that we've done to this and how long that it's gone on. And I mean, my opinion is we've waited in the past until things settle down, and I think that we should do it again. With that being said, if you've all decided that we're moving on, I do have a choice among the four that I would support.
Member Russell, the group did decide
Yeah.
we were going to move on and thought that we had four really great candidates. We just were trying to narrow it down to one. So we'd love to hear your
Okay.
first choice.
Okay, so my choice would be David Carroll, because I do think he has had an impact on the changeover in the Chamber of Commerce and in getting new connections. And so I would support Member Carroll. And so, I mean, with that said, I wanted to weigh in where I was standing on that. I figured that you probably had, and I apologize, I just couldn't get in. Thank you.
All right. Wow. Okay, so we have 3 for Childs and 3 for David Carroll, right? Is that what I'm looking at? So let's go around again. Is anybody wanting to change anything given those are our top 2? I'm not going to be a tiebreaker yet. So it was Childs, Friedman, and David Carroll. Go ahead, Member Wink.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Mayor Olson. I've known David since we were on Cultural Arts Commission together, and I know he's done that. And I just, one thing I was wondering is it fair to the other candidates if David's job is to do what we're praising him for doing? Like he's the director, the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce. Not that you can't do it as your job, but the others, it's not their job that they're getting paid income for to do the work that we're saying David's done. It feels a little apples to oranges. I'm not sure if it's relevant or not. I mean, I'm not saying he's not great. I think he's great.
Yeah, that's helpful.
It's a point, just something to point out. This person's doing his job and we're saying he does a great job at his job. But these people are volunteering and spending hours outside of their occupation to do this for the city. Just seems a little different to me.
Okay. Any other comments? Mayor Pro Tem Sierra.
Thank you, Member Wink. And thank you, Mayor. I think just a little bit of clarification, just because I have my notes here from the previous meeting, but when we had just one applicant last time around, I thought we opened it up as well to business owners in the community, so it didn't have to be a citizen. So correct me if I'm wrong. So I was using that kind of like as a baseline in terms of discussing, but Member Wink makes an excellent point if we're just going to be considering citizens at this point. So, and obviously Mr. Carroll is a citizen as well of the city, but just wanted to make sure that I had my understanding correctly from the previous meeting.
I think that might be true, although I'm not sure if we were that definitive about it. But Member Wink, did you want to respond again? Or did I forget to take your hand down? Okay. So this one's a hard one for me because these are the two that rose to the list for me. Although I have to admit that I don't know Charles Friedman. I'm sure I've met him. I'm sure I've met him because when I read all this, I thought, oh, I must know this person, but I haven't. But I thought that the kinds of things that he was doing, and particularly in the background without anybody kind of knowing, was exactly the kind of thing we want to celebrate. I also think that that David Carroll has done more than just the chamber work. He's done a number of things with city council or city appointed positions with, and also MOA and a number of other things. So he's really had an influence on the city in a long way beyond the chamber. And to answer to respond to the question of whether someone's lived in the city a long time, I did want to make a statement about that. We have actually chosen people in the past who are not residents ever of the city of Englewood. So I don't think that should be our only thing. And perhaps our next go around, we ought to set up very strict criteria for what we think that has to be if that is going to be one. I think that's been the tendency over the past maybe 4 or 5 would be people who've lived here 30, 40 years. But I hope we don't, I mean, I don't think I'll be involved in the next choice for it. So I hope that maybe we come up with some criteria if that is something you all think is important. It was the superintendent of the schools of Englewood that we awarded probably 9 years or something like that. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name because I didn't go through the Englewood system, so I'm really bad at remembering his name, but he had a huge impact on the community school-wise and educational-wise in the buildings at the time and everything. So I think I'm going to go with the Charles Friedman if we need a tiebreaker here. We've got some great options, and I think that David Carroll will be around, and I hope he gets submitted next year. Actually, I hope several people do, and that they continue to do the kind of work that they're doing. So I guess that would be by consensus. We'd have 4 of us at least to go forward, and Member Cuesta said he was fine with any of these as well. So Member Anderson.
I just wanted to make a comment about David Carroll since that kind of came down to those two. And just say I think his nomination packet was outstanding, and knowing him personally, he would have been a great choice. I would have happily supported either way. The mayor kind of went there on that tiebreaker. I think these decisions are very difficult, and I think it's just great. I wish we could do 4 Citizens of the Year. So I just really appreciate David Carroll and his work as well. So, and of course Jan Brown and Daryl as well. It's just a great group of people.
Member Cuesta.
Thanks, Mayor. And you're correct. If Mr. Friedman is before us at the meeting, that's terrific, and I'm happy to support him, and it's well deserved. Real quickly to Councilmember Russell's thoughts. I agree with her, and it's tough. We just can't think enough people. I mean, there's so many unsung heroes in Englewood, and it's hard to get everybody and get the maximum participation we'd like. So I am glad we're moving forward. But I agree. There's always somebody we'll overlook, and there's always people that deserve more pats on the back than they get. So I appreciate she raises that, and looking forward to congratulating Mr. Friedman. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, so I think we can move ahead with that one. I think the question is how we do it. That maybe should we have a conversation with that next week? when we talk about whether we come back in person or not, whether we actually do any in-person kinds of things, could that, or do you already know you just want to do them? I think the majority I've heard is wanted to do things virtually. I personally would prefer to do it virtually, and then at a time when we think it's a little bit easier to do an in-face one as well. But Member Stone, I'll let you kick off.
Thanks.
We'll do want to discuss it.
I was just going to say, if we're going to decide whether or not we're doing stuff in person next month at our next meeting, then we might as well just decide whether or not we're doing stuff in person at our next meeting. We shouldn't have multiple discussions on the same topic throughout the month. We've already agreed that we're going to have this discussion once a month until we come back, so we can do that next week.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Sierra.
If that's the direction that Member Stone wants to go, then that's fine with me. If we're going to have a discussion tonight in terms of how to do this specifically, I'm in favor of moving forward with the virtual to begin with, and then deciding from there when we can have something outdoors.
Okay, are there any other burning desires of others to talk about it tonight further? Member Cuesta.
I don't have one, but I do see a distinction in this, in a standard meeting we would have. Typically, at least I recall these presentations in the end, people gather. I think there's refreshments, where it is a meeting, we kind of get together and then part ways. Right? I think there is more of a communal aspect of this one. And so I think that that's something we should take into account, because that's a critical step to me, that this person does get the recognition, not of council only, but of their neighbors, the people that show up to tell them they've done a good job. And so I want to make sure we can take full advantage of that, so make sure the person gets a proper credit. Thanks, Mayor.
All right. Well, let's come back to it next week, and we will. Actually, we'll be voting on this on September 8th, right? We don't have a huge window of time to do it outdoors, but let's talk about it next week and make a definitive decision about how it happens, along with the other conversation, and we can make some distinctions maybe between these kinds of things in that conversation next week. Does that help you, Ms. Arnoldy? Yep. All right. I think we're ready to move on to the next item, which is 4B, and Director of Public Works Maria DeAndre and Capital Projects and Engineer Manager Tim Hose will present to discuss recommendations for improvements to the stormwater system. And they have a great PowerPoint to take us through our discussion.
Yeah, sorry for the connection.
Oh, that's all right.
Thank you. Sorry.
All right, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mayor and City Council. Just trying to get my slide presentation going here. A moment, please. All right, so tonight we're here to talk to you. We have some, I'd like to give you an overview of the program itself, and then also go over the kind of where we are with the overall stormwater projects. And then we're going to talk specifically and give you specific, very technical information on what we've discovered in terms of the what we're calling the South Drainage Basin, which evolved from our further engineering analysis related to the what we called the S3A project. So we started there with, there we go. All right. We started with all right, there we go. So we're focused in 4 different areas. First being our overall system maintenance, repair, planning, and capital project prioritizing, program funding, and then capital project implementation. So we have been working through these various steps over the last 2 years. And we're here at this point with at least the South Drainage Basin, where we're up to final engineering and permitting, which we'll go into in more detail a little bit later on. But we are moving down through the funnel, if you will, from top to bottom. And we feel like we have some very good results to share with you tonight. So overall, just briefly, we have been working diligently on system maintenance and repair. We've been reporting out in the city manager's weekly update on our efforts to clean out the accumulated debris in the Oxford pipe, which has been very successful. We repaired the line in Jason Court as a part of that project. And with our existing staff, we've been systematically cleaning out all of the storm sewer pipes throughout town. And we're roughly about 60% complete, with the entire city anticipated to be completed around November timeframe. We have completed the storm sewer master plan, which we brought to you back in both February and March. And I'm in the process of developing an overall proactive maintenance plan that kind of builds on those recommendations from the master plan, so that again, we can look at the system as a whole and identify what other maintenance tasks we need to complete. And then as far as capital projects, we did complete the feasibility study for flood-prone areas. That's what we call the caliber study. And the recommendations that came out of that, we had 13 projects that were identified and prioritized by them. Those first two being S1 and S2. And we've issued a request for proposals to prepare the detailed engineering design for that work. And that's out right now, and proposals are supposed to be submitted on September 11th. So then once we get the final design for that, we would move into construction for projects S1 and S2. Obviously, we would come back to council before we get there. And then the third project that was identified as a priority, both in the caliber study and in the storm sewer master plan, was project S3A, which was essentially the western half of project S3A. And I'll show you that in a minute here. I'll jump ahead here to the map. So this map shows how we had broken up here. This black line is the South Drainage Basin. And you can see here S3A extends roughly from Broadway, which is north and south, all the way over to roughly the north end of the Clarkson cul-de-sac, which is just a couple blocks west of Rotolo Park. And then S3B extends further east over to just east of Duncan Park here. And you can see S4. So as we went into, I'll just jump back up here. So we have also done some issues or some of the tasks associated with program funding, including completing our stormwater rate study and moving forward with another planned stormwater rate increase through the 2021 budget process. So again, these were the 4 top projects that we've been focusing our efforts on. S3A, the intent was to just look at that project. We've hired one of our on-call consultants, Alteg Engineering, to take a look at that. And what they've found is kind of taking the caliber study, which was up at 30,000 a foot level and less detailed, to come down and be more detailed about how do we solve those problems specifically within that area. And as they did that, what they really did was they looked not just at S3A, but they expanded the scope really because of the upstream effects from S3B and S4, because they're funneling down through S3A. They really looked at kind of this whole area, and that's what you'll see tonight presented, is a solution that solves for the 25-year storm event for this entire area and our recommendations as such. So again, as I mentioned, S1 and S2, we're currently out getting proposals for engineering services. That will come back probably at that first or second meeting in October to City Council. And tonight we'll go into more detail on the technical aspects and request permission to move forward to final design for this area. So the projects, as we recommended that you'll see tonight, total just under about 2.7 million. So this was significantly less than the cost estimate that Caliber had originally proposed. We are building on the recommendations and the technical work that they had done, but as you'll see when Alteg presents here, there is a lot more detail that went into it, and we don't feel that we need to replace as many of the pipes, but instead use the existing capacity more fully by putting in inlets and then replacing some of the pipes to achieve that same capacity. So of the improvements that they're recommending, which is just about 4.5 million, we would recommend moving forward with about 2.7 right now. And then there would be some future improvements, which we'll detail out, that's just under 2 million that would be in the future. So what that means is that once we get through some of the other higher priority projects, we would come back to these at some point. So with that, I'm going to call up another PowerPoint here. So we did want to show this video just for your reference. So this is from the window of Frank's Pizza on the evening of July 24th, 2018, when we had that significant storm event. This was provided by a citizen to city staff. And what you can see here is flowing north in the southbound lanes of Broadway is a significant amount of water. And you can see it's probably at least coming up on that light pole there, at least a good 1.5 feet to, above the curb line. So it's coming up onto the sidewalk, overflowing the capacity that's within that existing curb line.
Should we be seeing that now?
Yep.
Oh, I'm not seeing it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry about that. I did not share
I
that.
think you just unshared it. Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Sorry about that. Let me show that again.
Sorry, I thought you were getting it set up, so I wasn't too worried, but.
So you can see here, this is from the window of Frank's Pizza, and you can see that water is coming up a good 1.5 feet or so on that streetlight pole. And the water is flowing down because there's not enough inlet. There's a lot of water, but there's also not enough inlets in the curb line to catch all of that. And so what we feel is happening is that it's overflowing, not just here where we have this video evidence, but it's overflowing other areas and going into private property and other areas, other storm drain inlets, trying to get into the system and basically flooding private property. So this will be a big part of that solution is how do we go about putting in more inlets just to, again, get the water down into the pipes instead of necessarily overflowing everywhere. So with that set up, I'm going to introduce Luke Arnold, who's with Alteg Engineering. Again, they're one of our on-call engineering consultants, and they've taken a much harder look at the Acoma, what we're calling the Acoma Street area, or that S3A area, and now expanding that to S3B. So with that, I'm going to let Luke take over and present.
Good evening, everyone. Appreciate you having me here tonight. And it's actually been kind of an interesting challenge on determining what's going on with this system. Before we kind of get going, I want to point out a couple of things. Again, my name is Luke Arnold. I'm with Alteg Engineers. A little bit of background information on what we really tried to zero in on as part of the study. The first thing is kind of what are our criteria that we're using to evaluate what needs to be done, what doesn't. The first thing we did is we settled on a 25-year event as the baseline for the design, or not for the design, for the study work that we're doing, and what the results are for doing a 25-year model of the existing system and then the proposed changes. One of what we kind of looked at as far as criteria was what are the depths at the inlets in the 25-year storm. What we're looking for is 8 inches or less is what we established with the city staff as a criteria. And so anything that was more than that, we started looking at ways to reduce that depth at those inlets to reduce the surface flooding and get more of the water into the pipes. Next thing we did was, after we did that, was we would also check the pipe capacities and see whether there was any areas where we were having trouble where the water was actually coming back out of the system through manholes. I understand that there was a few instances of that, and there's been some history of that in a couple of locations. We certainly didn't want to end up making that situation worse. We also did a quick check of a 100-year event, looking for any locations that were more than 1 foot in depth for a 100-year event, and looked and see whether or not what kind of an impact the proposed changes we had had on that. So a couple of key points I want to make sure that everybody thinks about as we're going through some of these analysis. The first one is to consider what the difference is between a peak flow and a total capacity of a sewer. What we're looking at is what is the maximum amount of water at a particular moment that is going through the system, versus the amount of total water that can go through the system over the period of the storm. The reason this becomes important is because when you look at it at a little bit higher level, you look at the details of how much water is going through the system, but when that water from a particular location gets to a particular pipe makes a big difference. And one of the things that's different in this model versus what was done by Caliber at a more high level is the Caliber model had about 53 different points where pipes intersected and water was let into the system. Our model has 258 nodes between manholes and inlets. So there's a lot more detail in when the water gets to what particular point than what was really possible in the previous model. So that's where there may end up being some differences between what we're coming up with in our model results and what the Caliber study did. And it's mostly with respect to when the water gets there. And the more detailed model has a better chance to accurately predict that. Another thing that I want to point out is what the difference is between open channel flow, where the water level in the pipe doesn't reach the top of the pipe. There's still a little bit of air in the top of the pipe, if you will, versus a surcharge flow, which actually puts it into a pressure condition where the water level will rise up inside the manhole above the pipe level. That's not necessarily a problem as long as it doesn't get up close to the surface. So that's where some of these issues, this model takes care of looking at that. And the other thing is that this model also includes a lot more detail on the elevation information, what surface elevation is. So taking that into account, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. Just for some visualization, what we've got is the grate inlet, type R inlet, and a type 16 inlet. The difference is the one on the left, the grate inlet, as you can see, is pretty much just an open grate, square, and there's no curb, or if there is a curb, there's no slot in the curb for the water to get in. Second type is a type, what we're looking at is a picture of a type R inlet. It's a curb opening type. There's no grate. All of the water goes in at the curb line. The third type is what's referred to as a combination inlet. This is a picture of a DOT type 16 inlet. And that's where it actually has both a grate and a curb hood to allow water in both directions. Now, this is, again, a map of that S3, S3A, S3B, S3C, the different areas. What we've done here is we've highlighted each of these areas with respect to where they fall on that priority list. So the Acoma Street area, and as you can see, Andrea, can you kind of highlight that one area, that area one? So right in that area, that would be the highest priority that we have on our list. Some of these are, the prioritization is based on what the effect is and how low, what the cost effectiveness of the solution is. And some of it is because there's certain pieces of work that have to be done prior to others that kind of forces that priority. So if we can go ahead 2, please. So this first one that we mentioned is Acoma Street. What you have currently out there is a couple of type 16 inlets, the combination inlets. Those are at locations A and B. What we're proposing is to replace those with the type R inlet at those locations. The reason being is that at a low point like that, what we call a sag condition, those actually have higher capacity than what the type 16 combination inlets. Then the next thing you'll notice is locations C and D are additional inlet upgrades in the alleys, which is where some of the biggest issues that you had in this area were at. If you could go on to the next one, please. So what you're looking at here is there's a bit of a color code. If you remember, inlets A and B were the two that were in the low point in Acoma. The red line, if you look at the top of each of these graphs, the red line indicates where that 8-inch level is at. So what you're seeing on the top one is existing, the current one, the inlet B on the previous screen is showing that it's going over that 8-inch threshold. With the improvements that we're recommending, on the bottom one, you'll see that it actually drops down, and realistically, all of those inlet capacities, the depths at those inlets drop down to some extent or another. All of them are remaining well below that 8-inch level that we established. So the next slide is essentially a profile of that pipe run. So what we're showing here is where the water level actually would end up in the, is that working, Maria?
There you go.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to actually see how that water rises and falls. And you can actually kind of see where there's a bit of a flow to it. That's where the water levels ends up. So this pipe that you're looking at, number 224, that is what we're referring to when we say it's an open channel flow. But when you look at the pipes to the right, 208 and I think it's 266, you'll see that that water level actually rises above the top of the pipe. That's a surcharge condition. There's nothing wrong with the surcharge condition, particularly when we're dealing with something like a 25-year storm. If it was a 5-year, we would simply design it to make sure that it's all open channel, but with a 25-year, we'll allow it to build up. What we don't want is for it to build up higher, close to or higher than what the rim elevation is on the manhole, because that's when you actually start to have geysers.
Would you entertain a question at this point?
Certainly.
Member Wink?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Arnold, thank you for allowing the question. I wanted to ask you something about the previous slide, if you don't mind. So, thank you. I'm curious about whether or not inlet B's or A's activity down on the after implementing your proposed solution. Isn't that?
Yes.
Okay, it looked higher than before, but I see it is lower.
Yes, it's the grid scale.
It seemed like one that deviated from the others, and so I was curious to know what was driving that and wanted to know if it was significant. But no, this is great. I love your visualizations. They're very applicable to helping us understand what you're saying. So thank you. Thank you. We can move forward again. Thanks.
Yep. Keep in mind that red line is always going to be showing what our threshold is. And so because the scales change, look at the red line versus where the peaks are at.
I did get that. Yeah.
Yes. Just a reminder.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, continue.
Okay. Can we move on to the Broadway low point, please?
Luke, we've got about 5 more minutes, Luke, if you want to move through them a little bit.
Okay. So at the Broadway low point, what we're proposing is some revised inlets, more capacity at this location. One of the other things that we're looking at is actually making changes in other locations that will help that in combination will help to reduce these levels down below what our threshold is. So if you could go ahead to the next slide, please. You'll notice on the top, we've got several of those inlets that are up above that 8-inch for the 25-year storm with the proposed improvements. And this is more than just the improvements that are right at that location. This is also including the other improvements that are in the proposed list. So this is kind of after everything's done. You'll notice that everything comes down. In this case, it's not just the improvements at that location. It's actually adding other inlets further away to intercept some of that water. Go ahead and go to so an example of this is that proposed combination inlet at Tufts and Lincoln. That inlet, adding a second inlet there is actually to help the low point on Broadway around the corner and not really to apply a whole lot of changes to what that other inlet at that location sees. So that's an exact example, I'm sorry, of what we were just talking about. And again, if you go to this one, you'll see what those two inlets do. It does help, but not a lot, that inlet I, or the inlet J, I mean, but it does help quite a bit downstream. So the next one, please, Broadway and Union. This is a location where, again, we're actually proposing an inlet on the west side of Broadway at the Union, and then running some new pipe down to that low point in Acoma. The new pipe here is recommended because adding that additional water in at that point overwhelms the existing pipe. So we want to upsize that pipe to make sure that that system handles it capacity wise. This again is an improvement that will help with that low point in Broadway. What you can kind of see here, which one are we on? This is what the existing looks like at that location on Acoma. You can see that the water level is coming very far up into those manholes. I believe we should have another example that would actually show that proposed, what it looks like afterwards. So here's the same location, and as you can see, the water levels are much, much better at that with the pipe upsizing, even with the additional water that we're adding from Broadway. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. So this is a bit of a choke point in the system on Tufts Avenue. My understanding is that there's a little bit of an issue with one of the manholes in that area actually being paved over, that it's had some trouble in the past with water kind of spouting out, which is what we're talking about. What we're proposing here is that what has actually happened is that Bannock Street and Tufts, to the left on this screen, to the left of that kind of magenta pipe, that pipe right now is not a round pipe. It's actually what we refer to as a horizontal elliptical. And that means that it's not as tall as it is wide. That pipe is that way to avoid a sanitary sewer in the alley between Bannock and Cherokee. In order to alleviate that, without having to replace that or replace the sanitary sewer for probably quite a distance, we're actually proposing replacing the round pipe with an elliptical pipe, and to improve some of the grades. It's a little tough to really explain without showing a lot of pictures, but basically what we're doing is we're eliminating what amounts to a little bit of a constriction where those pipe sizes change. We're moving it to a spot where we can control that a little bit better and actually provide a little bit more slope on the pipe, which helps to increase the capacity, and everything works better. If you look at this one, you can kind of see right on the right-hand side where the bottom of the pipe is actually higher, where that pipe 265, that's the horizontal elliptical pipe. So that water has to build up to a certain point, and you can kind of see what the results are for the existing and where that water level ends up coming up. If you then move to the proposed, you'll see that we actually correct that situation, and with some of the cleaning up the connections, that lowers that. And this, keep in mind, is with all of the recommended improvements, which includes all of the additional inlets. This is where I mentioned earlier, the peak flow factor comes into play. The primary thing being that the pipe has the capacity if you spread out the time that the pipe stays full. And that's what's happening to some extent here, is the peaks are actually going down a little bit, but the total amount of water that's being put through the system is increasing. Okay. Can we go on to the next one, please? So this section is, again, another pair of proposed inlets on Broadway, primarily to catch that long downhill from the south end at Bellevue. There's no inlets for 8-10 blocks. So what we're looking at is to, again, put in a couple of inlets, get that water moved over into the system. And you can see that we've actually got to do some pipe upsizing, partially for these inlets and partially for some other recommended improvements, again, further upstream. This piece is another location where some upsizing, and this is you got to pay attention. This north is to the left on this one. This is another upsizing to alleviate some flooding in a low area on Sherman Street, and to allow this to drain a little better. It's in conjunction with some new inlets at a couple locations. This is pipe upsizing that's necessary to allow that to that water to get through, and actually allows it to get down and past some of these other choke points a little bit quicker, which actually reduces the peak flow. So go ahead and run this one, please. What you're seeing on this, especially on that right-hand side, now you're seeing some of that water level is actually coming up out of the manhole. It's coming up above the manhole. That's the situation that we absolutely want to avoid when it comes to pipe capacity. So under the proposed condition, that same stretch, oh, did we pass it? Granted, I think we missed it. We ended up going to a different spot. But what happens on that Sherman and Layton is that instead of being above the ground surface, it's actually barely above the pipe with the proposed improvements. So on that right-hand side, where that pipe is at, on the very far right, the water surface actually comes down to barely above the top of the pipe under the proposed conditions. So it gets rid of that particular problem. Okay, so Grant Street in Shenango. This is on the right-hand side, you can see location Q and P. This is an area where it's a low point, and actually suffers a bit from the water that's already in the storm sewer in Shenango, actually goes backwards through the pipe and really restricts the ability of water to get out of those, get into the inlets and then actually get into the system and downstream. And so because of that, we're looking at some proposed pipe upsizing, again, further upstream. And incidentally, the costs of some of these upstream ones are a little bit higher. It's not just a couple of inlets. If you could go to the next page, you'll see that there's a very drastic improvement. Oh, if you can go to the profile or the one page back, please. You can see that we do still have a spot under the proposed on the bottom that's a hair above that 8-inch, but it's not much. It's like we're within an inch or so of that, as opposed to being almost 2 feet deep. So there's a definite advantage to the upsizes that would happen in this location. You can see what this is going to do for the surface flooding. And then as you look at this existing condition, both at the left and the right, we've got water that's just, the system is completely overwhelmed. Do you have the proposed next, Maria? Now under proposed, you can see still some surcharge pipes where the water levels gets above the pipes, but much, much better performance. Okay, can we move to the next location, please? Here is a little bit of a different approach. This is getting fairly far down in the system. And right now what we're showing is that these are actually some of the worst inlets on the existing because there's a very large area up Fox Street, up Elati, to the northeast of this area. There's a very large area that comes down and gets into this system. So what we're kind of proposing is providing a little bit of a relief valve with those two new inlets, and also with a valley gutter that would allow the overflow and control the overflow in that intersection to allow it to get out quicker.
Come on. Ugh,
Not cooperating tonight?
not working. There we go.
There we go. And this kind of shows you what the impacts are at those inlets. Again, bringing everything down below that 8-inch level. So then the last piece is on Delaware Street. What we found in our modeling is that Delaware Street, the entire system is undersized. So what we've got here is that this piece would be a bit more major project, which would involve several blocks worth of reconstruction of the storm sewer to upsize those pipes and account for the runoff that comes in there. One thing to note about this, we have it as a priority 9. It's the advantage here is that I'm not aware that there's a lot of drastic surface flooding. This street is fairly steep. The water will run down it. If you don't do these improvements, the water will just continue to run down the street. But it's not going to be as much of a flooding risk as some of the other locations where it can get into homes and other structures. So that's why this one's a little bit lower priority. Another thing to keep in mind is that you can actually do this one pretty much anytime you want. It doesn't impact any of the other improvements in any way, so it can be done really at the city's convenience.
All right. For the sake of time, I'll jump past these examples. And then the following 2 projects are what we're calling future modifications. So Luke will just touch on those briefly, and then we'll be open for questions.
Yep. And again, these are things that probably could take place at a later time as the city gets additional funding. They will not necessarily mean that the rest of the improvements don't work. One of them is this proposed spray lining, and that's really to kind of take the ridges out and smooth the surface on that pipe a little bit. Will help to reduce the water levels upstream, but is not necessarily an essential piece. It could even be a maintenance project at some point in the future. Mm-hmm. And if we could go to the second one, please. The second one is the concept of putting a pond in Duncan Park. Now, what we're talking about here is actually a buried structure. If you look on the left-hand side, you can kind of see an example of what we're talking about. Dig a hole, put these pipes in the ground, and then bury it again. So it would not ultimately affect the use of that Duncan Park in any way. What it accomplishes is it allows the flow that's coming from that upper end of the system and from the Cherry Hills Village, that it will provide a little bit of a, kind of think of it as a surge tank. And it takes that peak off and spreads out the time that it is injected into the rest of the system over a longer period of time. Same amount of water, but instead of coming in one sharp peak, it spreads it out so that it comes in over a longer duration and not as high of flow rate. So this is another thing that could be considered in the future, would have system benefits, but the cost is going to be a little higher. It is not necessarily a priority that you need to do to take care of the surface flooding right now, which was the primary focus.
Thank you, and we'll skip those slides in the interest of time, but we do have those examples. So we have quantified the amount of materials, and we have provided an estimate too. So again, my last slide that I previously went over. We're estimating the recommended or current modifications at just under 2.7 million. And we feel that we could complete that design essentially in-house using our existing staff and move forward with that. And the future modifications, which again was the Duncan Park underground storage and the lining along Tufts and Clarkson, this blue line, that those could be done in the future at some point. So again, all the things that we just showed you estimated at just under $2.7 million. So with that, we'll end our presentation and open it up for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director DeAndrea, and also Mr. Arnold for your presentation. So Council, we need to give direction tonight as well as get our questions answered. So feel free to weigh in on both. So if you have questions to ask, and then if you want to weigh in on whether we move forward with the recommendations, that would be helpful. Who'd like to kick us off? And how will I know if Councilmember Russell has her hand up?
Can
you
Mayor,
go ahead?
Can you? Okay, because I was wondering the same thing. I have two questions. One of them deals with the alley in Bannock, where a lot of the flooding occurred. I didn't see anything to address that drain in the middle of the alley between Acoma and Bannock.
Certainly. So Councilmember Russell, right here, this very first project. So on Acoma Street, we're recommending new inlets on Acoma. And here's the upgraded inlet on that alley between Acoma and Bannock. So that inlet would get enlarged. And what we see happening from these previous storms is that all that water that was on Broadway is flowing across land or across Acoma, and it's not being captured here at this low point. And so instead it's continuing to cross private property and get down into the alley and then continuing even further west through private property. So by capturing that water here in the street is really the intent of this sub project, including that one in the alley between Acoma and Bannock.
Okay, so just one comment about that. I know that people were told, I was told also that the drain between the alley that I'm talking about between Acoma and Bannock, that drain in the alley flows back to Acoma. That's what I was told. And so it adds more water to the system. And then when the stuff that comes down there, there is no pipe between that alley and Bannock itself. There's that open concrete culvert.
That's correct. Mr. Arnold, do you want to address that and how this area drains?
Yes. So the inlet in the alley between Acoma and Bannock, the pipe goes from there back to Acoma Street to the east. Mm-hmm. There is also, as you mentioned, basically it's like almost a little covered little box kind of a structure that's at the surface that goes to the west and drains to Bannock Street. Mm-hmm. It's a bit of an overflow. It does have somewhat limited capacity. One of the improvements is, if you can see here, we've actually proposing about 65 feet worth of 48-inch pipe. And that is in part to make sure that that system in Acoma Street has adequate capacity to be able to drain be able to handle the water coming in from those larger proposed drains. The other thing that was impacting that is, as Maria mentioned, over at the low point in Broadway, those low point inlets actually come through a pipe to the west to Acoma Street as well. Mm-hmm. And I think, so that whole system as a whole had some choke points, and that was largely a result of the water actually coming in the Acoma or the Broadway Street low point, spilling over, coming surface wise coming across through those alleys, across the properties, and making its way ultimately to Bannock Street. With the changes, the additional inlet capacity in Broadway, the additional inlet capacity uphill from Broadway, if you look at C and D are the two that we want to look at carefully. And if we can go to the next slide, you'll notice that C and D go from, there's not necessarily a huge, they actually end up with a little bit more depth in them, which seems counterintuitive, but what that means is that we're actually getting more of that water captured in that location instead. The pipe capacity, the pipe upgrades will allow that water to get in and get out so that we reduce the surface flooding.
And onto private property. Exactly.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And I guess what I'm a little bit concerned about also is that Broadway, the west side of Broadway at the low point is much lower than the east side of Broadway. And there's a hump in the middle. The water on the other side of Broadway is not coming over there. But the sidewalk is actually lower. I was actually standing there. The water came up way over the top of the sidewalk. So I'm not sure that increasing that drain size there would necessarily help that because of how low that sidewalk is on that side of the street. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yes, yes, I do, I think. So M, N, and O are the west side, and you're correct that that those inlets, that the water from K and L on the east side don't cross that median in Broadway. They just kind of sit there. Because this is a low point, this is where everything collects. By upgrading the inlet size, it allows more of that water to get into the system faster. The other thing that the downstream pipe upgrades allow that water to get out faster. The upstream, some of those other improvements reduce the amount of water that even gets to this point, so it doesn't build up as deep as what it currently does. So it's a combination of all of those factors to address both the volume of the water and where it's at and what time it comes through the system.
Okay, so and this really wasn't my second question, but I have stood in the alley in Acoma right behind that car dealership. And when that system is running, you can actually see water coming from the east running. There's an open pipe, but there's 2 layers of pipe there. I don't understand how that works, but that pipe is totally full when it is draining. So if we increase the inlets, isn't that going to are we increasing the size of that pipe?
We are at the point where it's actually causing the constriction. So if you go over to Acoma and the pipes in Acoma, that's actually where the restriction is at.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where we're doing the pipe up sizes. The reason that you're seeing it backing up is actually not because that pipe right next to C is not big enough. It's because that the magenta pipes that we're proposing to be 48-inch, those pipes are currently what, like 24-inch? So that's where the restriction's at. That's what's holding everything back.
Okay, so that answers that question. My other question is down on Fox and where you're proposing to make those inlets bigger down there just before it goes into Rotolo Park. So how is all of that and increasing the flow going to impact Rotolo Park? Because I'm concerned about how fast that pond fills up. And if we increase the flow, it's going to fill up much faster.
Yes and no. It will fill up faster, but it will also have the opportunity to get water from like that area. That water will still have the opportunity to get out of the park through the system downstream before some of these further areas upstream to the east and southeast can actually get there. Tim and I were talking about this earlier today, and we actually are suspect that some of the problems that Rotolo Park had during that storm may have been related to the outlet from that park getting plugged. And
okay, and there was a sinkhole there too. I think there was a sinkhole down farther also. Okay, that sufficiently answers those questions. Thank you for your time.
Mm-hmm. And Councilmember Russell, you do make a good point though. What we want to make sure is by putting more water in the system or making these upgrades that we're not creating downstream issues, any further downstream issues. And that was a point we wanted to make sure we addressed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next is Mayor Pro Tem Sierra.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Thank you, Director DeAndre, for the presentation. I guess my question has to do with just the timing of these changes. Are we considering these changes still after S1 and S2, after the completion of that, or is this something that can happen quickly?
Yeah, this is, so again, we feel comfortable that we're not impacting downstream properties negatively. So as we've talked about, S1 and S2 are quite complicated with the railroad, with CDOT, working with the city of Sheridan. And so we're going to do a very similar analysis in terms of doing very detailed design for S1 and S2. We are soliciting proposals from engineering consultants right now, but we feel confident that we can move forward with final design. So preparing the plans and specifications for the work that we presented tonight so that we could probably start after the first of the year sometime.
Okay, and I guess I just have concerns just overall in terms of just what the impact would be to S1 and S2 if we're increasing the flow that are going into the piping, which eventually is going to lead to S2 and then S1. It seems to be a little bit counterintuitive from what we heard over the past year, and I think that's where my concerns are at the moment, Director DeAndre and Mr. Arnold. So I don't know if there's something that you can state that may help alleviate some of my concerns that I have about just the increase of water into some of these, just downstream before it gets to Santa Fe.
Sure. So I think this map will help show that. So you can see we're talking tonight kind of about the area here in the oval, and you can see the green space, the greenway here that separates Rotolo Park on the east end out to kind of the start of the S2 pipe. And so it's that greenway that's really able to capture, if there is any additional flow, it's able to capture it within that green space. So we're not necessarily creating as much flow through the green area as we're getting the water out of the streets and off of private property into a lot of the existing pipes that we already have, and creating those upgraded pipes that we've talked about tonight. So again, the inlets, allowing more water in and upgrading some of the pipes, but not necessarily letting more water out into this green space, but what is that will be able to capture that or hold that without negatively impacting the downstream of S2. We do know though that the water being collected through S2 and also ultimately S1, which also has all of this upstream flow to it, is impacted by the pipes coming into it. So we know there's bottlenecks in S2, and that's what's going to be addressed through that future project. Does that make sense or help?
It does make sense, and I'll just, I'll let council ask additional questions regarding this.
And Mr. Arnold, would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, and I would have actually one other little piece to add. We were very sensitive to that particular issue throughout the study, and I just went back to double check the difference in the water surface at Rotolo Park with the existing versus the new, including the new pipes, including the new inlets. The actual maximum water surface is modeled as only 1/100 of a foot different. So what that means in practical terms is the proposed work isn't going to have a negative impact at Rotolo Park or downstream, and we did model a little bit downstream just to make sure that we had the tailwater conditions. So to address your concern directly, as much as it seems like you're putting more water down there, again, it's a bit of a timing issue. We're putting more water spread out over a little bit longer period of time. It does not seem to have any effect on the downstream pipes in that S1 and S2.
Right. Our next question is from, Councilmember Wink. And feel free to say if you want to go forward with anything too.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I actually don't have any questions. And I very much, as I mentioned earlier, appreciate the level of technical detail you chose to go into through this presentation. I think was exactly what we need to manage the potential for questions and misunderstanding of what you're proposing. So I appreciate that we have information that compares to what we have from the Caliber study and goes into more granular detail on certain facets of that set of insights we have. And it seems, yeah, I made so many notes, I don't know what to say. I'm in favor of moving forward with this. The information's there. I mean, the science is very clearly explained, and I think it's just a benefit for the city moving forward to implement what we've shown here today from our new findings. So thank you very much for the presentation. Mayor, I am in favor of moving forward.
Right. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director DeAndre and Mr. Arnold. Wonderful presentation. I think the hang up here for me is I did an analysis back when we were looking at doing just S1, S2, and a little bit of S3A on how many homes that would actually impact in terms of the 25-year flooding. And that's the information I really want to know. I do think that this will have a really positive impact on the number of homes that are really helped out upstream and some of the ones with the most severe flooding. And so, but before I commit to this, I want to really see if we can dig into those numbers. Am I understanding correctly that if we do these current proposed, the $2.7 million proposed changes, that will expand this S3, S4, S3A, S3B, and S4 all the way up to 25-year capacity in that whole area?
You're muted, Director DeAndre.
Someone else can field this for a moment.
Yeah.
What again, to kind of go back and what our criteria was is using a 25-year storm, we wanted to increase the inlet capacity so that in a 25-year event, we didn't have any place where water was standing more than about 8 or 9 inches in the street. That is a low enough number that it's not going to impact existing buildings, which are usually in the order of about 2 feet above the curb, at least a foot. So that pulls that spread of the water in away from the private residences. And then taking into account the downstream pipe impacts and everything else, we want to make sure we didn't have that negative impact downstream and just move the problem from one location to another.
Right. So there could potentially still be some of the homes that were found to be in the 25-year flood area from the Caliber study along the greenway there could still be flooding, but you're not adding new ones that would otherwise be flooding.
Exactly.
Okay. And then also, this is just a question about S1 and S2. I mean, we don't have estimates on, well, we have the original estimates, which was, I think, for 25-year pipes, about 40 million from before. Are we looking, I mean, this ended up being a third about, I think we were looking at about 9 million from the estimates. This is about a third of that. Can we expect something comparable to that when we go and look at S1 and S2? Or are we going to come back with, 12 or 13 million instead of 40 million?
Gosh, I sure hope so. Yes. So I'm not even joking. I would definitely hope that we can come back with a lower number. To your point, Councilman Anderson, I will certainly get you those number of homes. I should have done that and give you that exact number of basically how many we take out of the 25-year floodplain essentially through these projects that we're proposing. So I will follow up and give you that number. For the cost for S1 and S2, we do know that Caliber was conservative with their numbers overall because they had very little information, very little detailed engineering to work off of. Again, they were at that very high level. And so we're hoping not only through that conservatism, but remember, we're still going to explore this alternative route down Radcliffe where this little finger sticks out here, taking that alternative pipe down along Radcliffe to the South Platte. We hope that could save a significant amount of money. While it will cost definitely to do that, we can save money within the Oxford Street and hopefully retain that capacity without having to do too much more, maybe than perhaps line that one in Oxford would be the goal.
Okay, so then with that, the kind of the last comments I have is I'm supportive of going forward with this right now as proposed. But I would, when you come back with S1 and S2, I want to request that we get a sense of how that's going to, what the impact on fees is going to be, so we can take that all into account when we go. We kind of have everything landing with water and sewer and storm drain here at the same time, which I think is great. But hitting people's bills, what's going to be the impact on our water bills, since they all show up on the water bills in the same way? What's going to be the impact to the fee payers? So I'd like all that kind of taken together in one approach. So thank you, Mayor.
Next is Councilmember Cuesta.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. In my question, I think kind of picks up where Member Anderson left off, and I see that 2.67, I believe, is the estimated amount on the recommended improvements, and I really like the study that was done here. I think it walked it through at a level that I understood well, and I would even point people to this presentation. I think Member Russell pointed out some of the things that are very obvious that scare people. Those portions of Broadway near Frank's where there was major water running over into Acoma, into Bannock, which you folks addressed. And as you've described it, assuming that the improvements you've suggested work, I understand how that would prevent that going forward. But again, going back to the estimated cost of 2.687, Councilmember Anderson mentioned the fees. How does this apply to those fees? Is what we're proposed thus far to take in fees, would this be accounted for, the 267, or would that be an addition? Would there be an additional increase in fees?
No, thank you for that question. So if you recall, we only looked at project S3A because the Caliber estimate was right around, I believe, $3 million, $3.5. And so we didn't feel that we could effectively charge for more than S1, S2, S3A, and possibly the hospital project. That's why we focused on those four, just from a money standpoint. And how much could we effectively bond for and then expect the ratepayers to pay back. So this is less than what we were anticipating for the S3A. And, so that S3A amount was built into our estimates for both the rates and the potential bond initiative. So no increase in rates, nor increase in the amount of bonding or loans would be necessary to accomplish this above what we anticipated.
Understood. Very good. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Mayor. And thanks again for the presentation. This was very informative.
And so, Member Cuesta, you're ready to move forward too?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up. I think all the questions except one little diddly one for me. Why is it that we don't have the details from the Cherry Hills Village area? What makes that so difficult to get?
Yeah, perhaps Luke, you can answer that. I think just a lack of detail and study on their part.
Okay.
But I know, Luke, you had reached out to them, I believe, to try and get some data.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
I was not really very successful in obtaining a lot of information. The issue from the technical standpoint here is when you get into the Cherry Hills Village area, the character changes. It's not storm sewers with inlets. It becomes very shallow swales, both at the roadside and through yards. There are a number of locations where I've actually seen some of these residences actually have water quality detention ponds on property. And to accurately assess how that is, we would actually have to expand our model all the way through Cherry Hills Village within the drainage area. And the model would essentially probably close to be twice as complicated. So I mentioned there's like 250 some odd nodes. We'd probably be pushing more like 500 nodes. And there's not really information like there is on the storm sewer system, where we know what size pipe it is, we know what the elevations are. Had to collect a little bit of information for some of the inlets for elevations that wasn't necessarily there, but we can do that from LiDAR. To do that level of detail as we have within the city of Englewood with the Cherry Hills Village would substantially increase the effort necessary to get an accurate model. And because of that, we could only make some similar broad assumptions as what was made in the Caliber model. Basically took that information, refined it where we could. But because of that, it's a little bit of an unknown, and that portion of the system is not nearly as detailed, just because the data collection effort would be a lot more substantial.
Okay, that's really helpful. I know that we've, over the years I've been on council, talked about the way that Cherry Hills Village impacts our community. And I just want to make sure that it wasn't a lack of cooperation, but more of just a lack of data that's been kept over time, and that happens, and they have a completely different kind of system. Okay, just wanted to clarify that, because I know that they would want to be, if something wasn't quite going the way it should, we could knock on a few more doors. So, all right, that's helpful. I don't see any other hands raised, and I just wanted to let Councilmember Russell know that if you do *9, we'll be able to see your hand raised. So *9 from the phone. But I want to see this come forward too, and I think the information that's been asked, if that can be in it, about homes impacted, would be great. And the funding piece is there. I'm really pleased to see the lower amount. So I think we had at least 3, 4, 5 of us. Member Stone, are you okay with it too? All right. Anybody else want to add in? Member Russell, if you want, I'll just call on you. There you go. It's okay. It worked. It worked.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Now we can't.
Okay.
But there you are.
All right. Okay. So just one question that I have is, why did they not take into consideration any of the other studies that we've had, like the 2005 study, the 2002 study? Did anybody look at those?
Absolutely. Yeah. And Luke, please chime in here. But again, the Caliber study was, they had Caliber and analyzed that.
I love it. Don't worry about it. Just keep going.
And so, and then I know Luke Alteg as well built on those previous studies.
Okay, and so just one other question, because of this came up from a citizen in an email. So why would we not wait for Mile High, is it flood control district and UDC, whatever? Why is it necessary? Why would we not wait for what they decide? Are they looking at the same thing?
They're not, and I'll let Tim speak to that. So he's working with Mile High Flood District on that study. Tim, if you could just kind of give a little bit of background on what they're looking at specifically.
Yes, so the flood district, they're looking more at the hydrology versus the hydraulics. This study here is more about the hydraulics of the pipes, and the Mile High Flood District is going to look more at the hydrology and kind of how the water travels across the surface rather than in the pipes. They're going to get that new hydrology in, and we are going to look at potential funding participation for S1 and S2 with them. Once that hydrology is done, we've got to get our major drainage way plan approved by the district before they'll agree to participate in any funding with us. So we're working on that concurrently with this work as well to take advantage of as much funding as we can get from them. So we are definitely looking at that as a potential future source of funding for S1, S2, or potentially this work if the timing works out. So they are working on that study, and we're trying to bring it all together here to take advantage of whatever we can as far as funding and participation for them.
But also the Mile High Flood District is for the whole city, correct? Not just this area.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, they're looking at all of the basins in the entire city and going to help us prioritize everything else as well. So they're not just focused on the South Basin, they're looking at everything. So we'll have a better picture of the overall city and how that hydrology looks, and then what other things we might need to consider here. But we definitely know that this South Basin is something we need to prioritize and look at right away, just based on the situations that have happened and stuff there. So we're focused on that, and the major drainage plan will help us look at the entire city and make sure we're up to date on all of our hydrology and make sure all of our assumptions are correct. So we're using the right information to make our decisions with the latest studies and information that they've prepared for us.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the work that's been done on this, and I totally understand the community. I know they're very concerned, and there isn't a day when it rains that they're not terrified over there in that area. So I am okay to move forward with that. And thank you very much, Mayor.
Great. Thank you. I think you've got your direction to go forward. Thanks so much for all of you presenting. I loved the little videos embedded. I was hoping I could do those when I got the document. All right, next up is Agenda 4C. Our Judge, Joe Jefferson, is here to discuss with City Council a salary adjustment to the Municipal Judge's salary. And you have a few minutes to present, and we'll have a few minutes to discuss.
I'm going to try to be really brief given the hour and that we've got some guests waiting on us, but good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. It's my pleasure to address the public and Council tonight for the Council business of the 2021 salary for our presiding judge. Recall the Council is setting the salary for the position and not for me personally. This is not a review of another elected officer's performance, but rather a market-based decision based on fair compensation for comparable work. Similar to years past, I provided Council with a Council communication and an updated salary survey conducted by HR that I supplemented with additional information that I thought would be helpful. It appears some additional information has been provided tonight in the Council's packet by HR and the City Manager's Office, including a raw data set from the consultant, as well as an additional survey conducted as part of the compensation survey. I think the survey generally shows that our salary is below market for comparable operations, which is acceptable to some degree for an elected position. Since the survey shows a current salary that is below market in 2020, I'm recommending a 3% increase in 2021. The employee union increase for the overwhelming majority of city staff is set at 3.5% in 2021. And it's my understanding that Council is considering a 2.5% increase for the few MACH non-union employees. Needless to say, I personally don't do this job for the money, so your decision, whenever that will be, will not impact how I do my job for the citizens and the community as a whole. After scheduling for some time for both the new associate swearing in and then afterwards, the presiding judge salary discussion for tonight's regular meeting, I was actually informed late last week that the issue was switched from the regular session to tonight's study session, and that you plan to vote on this issue on September 8th. I would like to be present for that in case there's any questions or conversations, and I do plan to be traveling on the 8th. So I'm wondering if we can reschedule that or agree to take it up on consent agenda, and if any discussion, perhaps to continue the discussion or questions to the next meeting so I can be present to address any issues. I'm also happy to address any questions or address any concerns at this time.
All right, thank you. I would hope that we can get a clear consensus tonight and just move forward with it. I'm fine putting it on consent if everyone else is. But let's hear from folks. What would you like to do on this? I thought it was I thought you were asking for a 2.9 when I did the percentage on it, but you're saying it's a 3%.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So folks, we have three decisions tonight too, and we tried to split them out so that each one can be taken separately. However, it is in the context of the whole city that we make each one of the decisions. So what would you like to do? No one likes these discussions. Public officials do this all the time. Member Wink, or Mayor Pro Tem Sierra, you're up.
I guess I started off, and you're right. I don't like making these type of discussions like in public, but I understand our role, and we do have to do this. I think Judge Jefferson has done an amazing job, and he's, the presentation he provided us, I believe it was 2 weeks back, definitely provided just information on what he's done and where he's taking the court. So I am happy to move forward with the 3% increase that he is asking for. And just want to commend him for the job that he's done for our city. So thank you very much, Judge.
Thank you, Councilman.
All right, next. I don't see any. So that's proposal. Do y'all want to agree with that? Member Wink.
I wish I could have a conversation with council in private, Mayor, but none of this can be discussed in private, correct? Among the council, is that
well, actually, other councils do it all the time. But then come out and do it in the public for a final. But I guess our city attorney would have to give us direction on that.
Judge, the judge is not, you can't go into executive session under personnel because he is not a member of personnel. So there's really no exception that allows us to go into executive session.
That's right. And partly that's because he's the only elected judge in the entire state of Colorado. So other councils, when they're doing this, do go into executive session, but that's because they've hired him, so, or her. Member Costa.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're after. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I am agree with putting this on consent agenda, for September 8th. Thank you.
As proposed. Okay. And Member Russell.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a question because I was talking to someone in the last couple of days about cities that have given furlough days, and it may, I don't know for sure that it was Denver, but they're going to have 3 furlough days. So does that, even though the judge is elected, if the city had to do furlough days, oh, I do believe it was Denver because our neighbor works for the city of Denver. If the city had furlough days because of the budget issues, would that apply to the judge as well?
Madam Mayor?
Go ahead.
No. When you discuss the salary of the judge, you're not discussing an employee. You're discussing a budgetary issue of the impact on the budget. So when the judge's salary is set, it's a budgetary expenditure, and he would not be subject to furlough. Even if the court is shut down because the court is all furloughed, the judge is not furloughed.
Okay. All right. That answers my question. Thank you. I'm okay for putting it on consent agenda.
Councilman, and you're supportive of the 3%?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I had one question, and I just really appreciate the judge bringing this presentation forward, and I think he's done a tremendous job, so I thank him for that. Judge Jefferson, you mentioned a 2.5% increase. Maybe I missed something. I'm not sure what that 2.5, what we're considering the 2.5 for, or is that something on the staff side?
Again, that's included in the information, but that's my understanding from the city manager's office that the council may be considering for director levels, managers, supervisory, or I believe the other category is confidential, that those folks are non-unionized and would be subject to a different percentage that wouldn't be necessarily dictated by the union agreement. And again, I'm maybe stepping over my bounds here regarding your own advisement, but that's what I was referencing. So maybe for clarity, the city attorney or city
yes.
manager.
if we can get the city attorney, and actually maybe Manager Lewis can give us his take on that.
Thank you, Mayor. The way that Judge has represented that is correct. In the last two budget presentations that you've had, there is a proposed 2.5% increase for what we call MSC and MSCH employees. And all of the union contracts that you've already approved do include a 3.5% increase.
Great, thank you. Any other further comments or recommendations?
The only additional comment I have is, to me, that does seem relevant, is if the director level employees are getting a 2.5% increase, I feel like that might be an equitable across the board approach, and that's not a problem with no judgment anywhere on anybody's performance or anything, but just seeing a fair treatment from director level and higher, I think makes sense. That being said, if council is supportive of 3%, I'm supportive of that as well. But I do like the equity of director level on up, all getting a similar wage increase.
Thank you, Member Anderson. That would be my recommendation tonight, and I actually would like to treat all three the same way with that kind of an increase. I guess I do have a question though for our city manager about if we're at a point where we need to, a number of institutions are actually not furloughing, but actually doing a reduction of salary in order to, and they're taking the top level officers of organizations. And I wonder, is that ever done in a public setting? If we were to get to a point where we took a certain level of salary tops and just said, okay, we're going to take a 10% cut for the next 6 months because this is, so everybody stays employed, but you do it at certain graded levels. Is that ever done in a city?
It has not been done in a city that I've worked for, but I think that the council, under your authority over the budget, the city budget, could ask staff to present a budget that included such a reduction, and that is within your purview.
Okay. I'm going to let Member Stone go next since he hasn't spoken yet.
I'll be fast. I hope you can hear me okay. I support what Member Anderson was suggesting. You said it way better than I'm going to be able to right now.
I'm so sorry for your surgery. So you're suggesting a 2.5%, which are directors and managers. Member Cuesta.
Thank you, Mayor. And I had my window closed on me, so pardon me as I'm trying to open this up. Needless to say, we're also going to have a salary adjustment coming up for city attorney, city manager. Member Anderson kind of pulled those on into this conversation regarding the judge. So are these cost of living or are they performance based? Because if we're doing a standard for performance based, that takes the performance component out of it to me. If these are just cost of living, everybody gets the same thing, then I certainly believe in that equity. But and that's where I'm just seeing salary adjustments. So what are we basing these salary adjustments on? Is there any background on that?
Manager Lewis, do you want to chime in at all?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll attempt to. So we have completed a compensation study to really look at the salaries of every position in the city, including the judge, the city manager, and the city attorney. So you do have some frame of reference in terms of what the market is, but you are correct in your statement that these are not performance-based insofar as you could withhold salary increase or for any reason, including performance. But these salary adjustments that are being proposed are really to bring us more in line with market conditions because of the number of employees that Inglewood has that are union, or I should say part of a collective bargaining unit. We have limited ability to do performance-based salaries. I would like to get us there, but that would only apply to MSC and MSCH employees.
Okay, understood. Very good. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
So therefore it's cost of living. I would love to see us get to that point too. And I was going to suggest tonight at the end of this conversation that we put it on our agenda for this next year, because I think we've had a very awkward process for this in the past. I would love to, if we're going to do merit ever, that we set goals up for the year that we know we're measuring for that. And so I think it's better to just treat things more percentage wise right now and go with it. And if we see some position out of line and egregious with the market rate, then maybe we make changes there. which is, I think, what the judge is suggesting tonight.
I'm
Is
also,
that
I think,
perhaps it's a little bit out
suggesting
of, yeah. Go ahead.
And I'm also, I guess, suggesting that, taking these issues up does kind of commingle some issues, in response to Member Cuesta's response. The salary for the presiding judge truly should be a market rate decision only. There is no performance metric here. Of course, with the city manager and city attorney who report directly to you, there certainly is that element, and how the council wants to factor that in, I suppose is their decision to make. But again, this is a different decision in my mind. But again, this is a decision for council to make and for them to decide what the appropriate procedure is. And again, I will point out that we do have an existing council policy on this issue. And if council wishes to kind of readdress that, I'd certainly just ask for an opportunity to be heard as you redo that policy.
Great, thank you. I actually don't see it as being out of line. So I think that's the trouble I'm having. Lakewood is 156, I guess, and they're quite a bit bigger than we are. But we're talking about quibbling over several, like maybe $900 at this point. So I don't really care. Member Anderson, go next.
I was just going to say, I think that, I don't see this as performance based. I do think there's a market element here too, but there's also a budget element. We know things are going to be tight next year. And I think that's part of why we're seeing city staff looking at a 2.5% rate across the board. So I would take both budget considerations and market considerations into this conversation here, and think that's just kind of my reasoning on the 2.5%.
All right, so we need to do a round robin on this, and 2.5 versus 3, what would you like to put forward that will come on consent? We need a consensus here. So Member Anderson's at 2.5, I'm at 2.5. Let's go back around everybody else. Member Stone's at 2.5. Mayor Pro Tem Sierra, I'll take you next.
I'm still at 3, but I can understand the 2.5 as well, but I'll stick with my original thought.
Okay, great. And Member Russell?
I'm going to stick with my original thought.
Which is 3%.
Yes.
Okay. Member Cuesta?
I'm at 3 as well, but if 2.5 is what shows up on consent agenda, I'll move forward with that too.
Okay. And Member Wink?
2.5.
Oh, okay. So now we do have 4. Okay.
What?
I guess
well,
it's 4.
I hadn't said. I kind of, yeah, it's hard. When I studied, everything I had researched and prepared for the meeting, I thought it was, I was thinking about exactly what Member Cuesta said. Is this merit-based? Is it, and performance-based? I mean, what are we really basing this on, and how are we doing it? What are we doing? I was looking across the 3 positions we're discussing tonight. And I was, I feel as if really there's more to discuss. So I'd prefer to not have said anything or not say anything right now. But if we can't really have private discussion about this, then
we cannot. So we need to know. I'm sorry. So is it 2.5 or 3?
Yeah. The 2.5 just makes more sense to me right now.
All right. Okay, doke. We'll move it forward with 2.5. Thank you, Judge Jefferson, for coming tonight. And it is going to be on consent, so hopefully you feel comfortable not coming.
If there's any further discussion or questions, just pull it and I'll continue it and I'll appear at the next meeting if that's okay.
Okay.
Yep, we can do that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. On to 4D, which is adjustment of the city attorney's salary. Same issue. I would love to hear. Anybody want to make a recommendation? Member Anderson?
I just, I want to go with 2.5% across the board, so that I would continue with that one. Again, not a performance evaluation, but a market and budget considerations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wink?
2.5%.
Okay. Councilmember Stone?
2.5.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem Sierra?
I came in here tonight thinking I was going to give the same increase to all 3, just to keep it simple in a sense. But so if the direction is to go to 2.5 for Judge Jefferson, then 2.5 it is for the next two as well. For 4D, I guess, in the state.
All right. Anybody else want to weigh in? I'll do the same thing. So I think we'll bring that. All right. So is any member Cuesta?
Thank you. Just I've spoken on it, and it makes sense to me too. If this is more market-based, cost of living, the term that I was using, the alignment across all three is I'm comfortable moving forward with. Thank you.
Great. I should have asked at the same time, is anybody against us putting this on consent as well? Can always be polled, but okay. I think we're all okay with it being on consent then. And then the next one is for E, which is the city manager salary. Are you all interested then in 2.5 for that as well? I'm assuming. If you don't want that, speak up. I'm sorry, Member Russell, I wasn't looking to see if you were. I think you're fine.
No, that's okay. I'm fine. Thank you.
All right, so all three then will come to consent on September 8th. Great, thank you, everybody. We're going to take a little break before considerations of the minutes. If you're okay with that, just a 5-minute, let's come back at 8:07. Little recess. All right, everyone. Hopefully we're all back. Turn on our videos if you can. Okay. So agenda item 5A are the minutes of the regular city council meeting of August 3rd. Could I have a motion to approve these?
I move to approve the minutes of the city council meeting of August 3rd.
Thank you. Could I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Okay, please vote by roll.
Member Anderson,
Aye.
Member Cuesta,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra,
Aye.
Member Stone,
Aye.
Member Wink,
Aye.
Mayor Olson.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Great. Our next item is exciting. It's our appointments of judges, and presiding judge Jefferson is here to approve and by resolution help us to approve the appointments of Clara Lee Charlton, Benjamin Figa, I believe, and Jonathan Mark Lucero, each to serve a 4-year term as associate judges of the city of Englewood, commencing August 17th and expiring August 16th, 2024. Go ahead, Judge Jefferson.
Honorable Mayor and Council, it's really my pleasure to address the Council again this evening. Really happy to introduce to not only the Council, but to the community some new recommendations to our bench. I'd like to begin with Clara Lee Carlton. Clara Lee Carlton is now a long-term resident here in Englewood and shouldn't be a stranger to the Council. She has served some previous Council appointments, including our library board. Clara Lee was also the actually serves as the chair of the Colorado Bar Association Tax Section and is currently the president of the Greater Denver Tax Council Association. And so I'd like to welcome Clara Lee. I also want to recognize and welcome a new appointment for Judge Jonathan Lucero. Judge Lucero has been a magistrate in Denver County Court. He actually sits on the bench in Aurora Municipal Court currently. He also does some work in the 17th Judicial for dependency and neglect cases. He brings a wealth of knowledge and experience and diversity to the bench. We're really looking forward to him serving our community. Judge Lucero actually is a multi-generation Englewoodite and left us for some time, but has recently moved back. So we're really happy to have Judge Lucero back in our community. Next, I'd like to move on to Ben Figa. Ben Figa is an associate with Burns, Figa, and Will. He brings a wealth of experience representing state and local governments and past experience. He's actually had experience being an assistant city attorney for the city and county of Denver, as well as serving as deputy legal counsel to Governor John Hickenlooper, as well as prosecuting cases as the deputy district attorney in Boulder. And we'd like to welcome Mr. Figa tonight to be considered for appointment to our bench. I stand for questions at this time for the council.
Any question, council? Seeing none, could I have a motion to approve the appointment of these 3?
I move to approve the appointments of, should I go through the names?
Yes, please do. Now that you know how to say them.
Yeah, Clara Lee Charlton, Mr. Ben Figa, and Mr. Jonathan Lucero.
I'll second that motion, Mayor.
Thank you, Member Wink. All right, any discussion? Seeing none, let's please vote, and then we will allow the judge to swear them in, right? Okay.
Member Anderson,
Aye.
Member Cuesta,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra,
Aye.
Member Stone,
Aye.
Member Wink,
Aye.
Mayor Olson.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Great. So this will be our first full-time Zoom swearing in for judges. And can Mr. Figa be seen? I'm not sure that.
Yeah, do you not see him? He's showing.
No, there he is. Okay, he's on the second page of mine. Usually everyone that's active on the Zoom shows up on the first page, but good to see you all and welcome.
To proceed with the oath or affirmation of office, I would ask all three applicants to raise their right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Ben Figa.
Carlton.
Excellent. Thank you for unmuting, Judge Lucero. Do solemnly swear or affirm.
Do solemnly
swear or affirm.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
That
I will support the Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the State of Colorado.
The Constitution of the State of Colorado.
And the Charter and ordinances.
And the Charter and ordinances.
Of the City of Inglewood.
Of the City of Inglewood.
And that I will, to the best of my ability.
And I will, to the best of my ability.
Faithfully perform the duties of office.
Faithfully perform the duties of office.
As the Associate Judge.
As the Associate Judge.
During my continuance therein.
During my continuance therein.
Congratulations to each of you. I look forward to each of you serving our community with honor, providing justice with dignity, with compassion. Thank you all and welcome. And thank you all for your service to the City of Inglewood. Thank you, Council.
Oh, welcome. If we were in the chambers, we would all be clapping.
And my apologies to all of our newest judges. I would, hate to take away a great moment for swearing in, to have guests come. And so perhaps we'll have to do a follow-up party for all of you. And we will be executing an oath of office through the city clerk's office, through electronic means to ensure that that's all handled properly. Just FYI for the public.
Great. Thank you very much. All right. Your
Congratulations, everyone.
Today, especially. All right. Anybody else wanted to say anything other than welcome?
Actually, I'll just congratulate the three of them. That's a special moment to take the oath. So just congratulations to the three of you and good luck. So thank you.
And thanks for serving Englewood. All right.
Thank you all again, Council. Have a great evening and a great meeting.
You too. On to agenda item 7. Councilmember Russell, I wanted to let you know that you're the one up for responding to citizens tonight. Would you prefer to put it off to next week and have Mayor Pro Tem take it up tonight, or do you care either way?
Actually, I would greatly appreciate that.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem, if you don't mind, we don't have anybody signed up for the scheduled public. I'm not sure if we do for agenda item 8. Do we have anybody under unscheduled public comment?
We do not.
Oh, okay. Well, then we will just, on September 8th, then Member Russell, you'll be back on deck to do it again.
All right, great. Thank you.
All right, agenda item 9, consent agenda. Could I have a motion to approve 9B1, 9B2, and 9C1?
I move to approve 9B1, 9B2, and 9C1.
Thank you. Could I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Member Anderson. All right, please vote by roll call.
Member Anderson?
Aye.
Member Cuesta?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra?
Aye.
Member Stone?
Aye.
Member Wink?
Aye.
Mayor Olson?
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Thank you. There are no public hearings tonight under agenda item 10, so move on to 11, which is ordinances, resolutions, and motions. 11A1 is CB 32. Valley Sanitation District has a need for a water line located at Centennial Park. Staff recommends council approve a bill for an ordinance to grant a water line easement at Centennial Park, and our open space manager, Dave Lee, is here to answer questions and help lead us in a conversation. So, Manager Lee, go ahead.
This is a request that came in a little bit later on. What they found was that they needed some water inside the transfer station to do any kind of cleanup when they disassemble parts and so forth. And any of the excess water would be put back down into the sanitary sewer and continue on down the line. So this is something that's needed for hygiene and cleanliness of the transfer station.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Lee? Seeing none, unless Member Russell, I'll make sure you have a chance. None.
I have none.
Okay, good. I'll have a motion to approve 11A1.
I move to approve agenda item 11A1, CB 32 Valley Sanitation District need for water line at Centennial Park.
Thank you, Member Wink.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Member Stone. Any further discussion about this? Hygiene and water is really important, so let's vote.
Member Anderson?
Aye.
Member Cuesta?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra?
Aye.
Member Stone?
Aye.
Member Wink?
Aye.
Mayor Olson?
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Yes, thank you for your work on it. 11C1 is our next agenda item with the police headquarters building change order. Staff recommends that the City Council approve by motion a change order with the project contractor AP Mountain States LLC, aka Adelson and Peterson, to address several remaining items related to the police headquarters building project in the amount of $118,000 and $686. Public Works Director Maria DeAndre is here along with Sam Watson, our Deputy Police Chief.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So we do have 4 items on this that are covered under this change order. They were detailed in the council memo. One being the computer room air conditioning system in one of our AV data rooms. Then the armory room exhaust, installing what are called penal fixtures in the toilets of the holding cells to prevent them from overflowing. And then finally, some electrical modifications to accommodate some new DNA freezer units that are installed within the evidence area. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
All right, Member Quest has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Director DeAndrea. I certainly support making these improvements that are requested here. I see the total coming in at $118,000, and this is being deemed a change order. Does that mean this still goes on the bond if it's a change order?
Yes, so this was what was called a construction management general contract. So we had a guaranteed maximum price. And then if the city requests any changes from that original contract price, then we have to pay for those. And those are all accommodated from that bond, those bond funds.
How long does that stretch for? I mean, I guess I'd love to start moving things off the bond and onto just general funding in our general budget. So can you give me the parameters of that? When do we say this is no longer a matter of a construction issue that goes on the bond? It's a completed building, and now these are just upgrades, repairs we're going to have to make.
Certainly, yeah. So we have we've been working on this with Adelson and Peterson for quite some months now. And so we feel this is their final change order, and this will end the contract with A&P. And so after this, I know police is still working on the records management system, which will come from the fund, as well as the body cameras, I believe, are going to be used that. But for the building costs, there will be no further expenditures from the bond proceeds.
Understood. Very good. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Mayor.
Next is Councilmember Russell.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is, what is the balance on the project fund? How much money is left after this?
Certainly. That was included in the packet. The finance department keeps a tally on that, and I'll just pull that up here real quick or look at it.
I think the bottom line is like, well, that's the appropriated balance, $2,771,000.
I show $2,852,667 as total unencumbered bond premium remaining. So about 2.85 million remaining.
Okay, so which page was that on? Do you?
Yeah, it would be page 5 of the packet. So
is it that
after
balance fund report?
Yes. And it's kind of in an orangey box on the legal page.
Oh, okay. All right, I see it.
Okay.
Perfect. So that's all, and the body cams and that will fit into that price, right?
Yeah, so I believe there's a line up above where they're showing, let me see if they showed the body cams. I don't think they're listed out specifically, but I know that they've been talking about using the proceeds from the bond for those costs.
Okay, that's perfect. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director DeAndre. The question I have is regarding the CREA-AC system. It sounds like a cooling system was installed and it turned out to be too large, and so it's actually being, if I'm understanding correctly, it's being removed and a new system is being put in. What happened there? I mean, it sounds like an error was made. Was that on the design end? Where was that? Where was the error made? And is it is it appropriate that this should go in just as a change order we're paying for if the error wasn't? I'm just trying to understand where this problem happened.
Certainly. So the reason that the city is paying for that and not the designer nor the contractor is that it was installed per plan and per the design. The direction for the size of the unit came from staff. And so we have emails to that effect. And so since we directed them to install that size of system and it was too large, then it is the city's cost to accommodate the change.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I could have a motion to approve 11C1.
I move to approve 11C1.
Thank you, Member
Mayor. I believe it. Yes, sorry, you're correct. That is 11C1. I was backwards.
Okay, good. I didn't make the mistake this time. Good. 11C1.
That was definitely me.
It's okay. It's hard to keep track of all this when you're on Zoom.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Member Wink.
Yep.
Any further discussion? All right, please vote by roll call.
Member Anderson?
Aye.
Member Cuesta?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra?
Aye.
Member Stone?
Aye.
Member Wink?
Aye.
Mayor Olson?
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Thank you. Our next item is general discussion, 12A, Mayor's Choice. I'll ask all of council when you do your council member's choice if you talk about any boards and commissions you might have been at in the last month as well. So we had a police and fire pension board meetings last week. Both of them had to be canceled due to lack of quorum. Fortunately, there isn't anything pressing in terms of decisions, but we are taking a look at the time that we're having it to make sure that it fits with at least the new members that we had brought on. So hopefully we won't have that problem in the future. We did have water and sewer board meeting. I'm going to let the other two talk about that. If you want. I know, Cheryl, you like to talk about those, but there was a great meeting and a great presentation of things that we had seen before as a council. The Tri-Cities Policy Homelessness Group met last week, and we had sort of a run through of our final pestle. We are coming to the end of a number of things that we've been working on for the last year. A pestle is kind of a logic model analysis of all 3 cities. Each of the letters PESTEL stands for something different: political, environmental, sustainability. I can't remember all of them, but it's quite a robust document that kind of documents what's available in each city, what isn't available in each city around the issues regarding homelessness and policy and the ways that we approach it. we will hopefully have a final draft of that, and we're looking to pull all 3 cities together for a Tri-Cities meeting to actually go through that, as well as the research study that you got a prelim on before. So we're trying to figure out, how do we present this to everybody all at once rather than parading through each one of the councils. And thankfully, City Manager Devin Granberry reminded us that we haven't had a Tri-Cities meeting for a while. So we'll do it that way, and we'll keep you updated on some dates, probably do a little bit of a doodle on that. So keep your eyes open for that in the future. And I think that's it from me tonight. So on to 12B, council member choice. And let's see, we'll start with Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Regarding boards and commissions, I have one concern with involving the Keeping Wood Beautiful, and that is that that meeting overlaps so closely with Water and Sewer Board that I have not been able to make it to that board meeting several times. It's a half an hour difference, and when we first started, I think it was listed differently when we actually made these appointments. And so I probably I shouldn't have done it from the beginning, but I thought it was at 6:30 instead of 5:30. But I have gotten to a situation where I don't think it's possible to do both. I thought it was at first because the first few meetings I went to for water and sewer were very short, and it's changed, which is a good thing. I think water and sewer deserves the kind of attention it's getting from staff, and I think it's great. But I can't do both. I don't know if there's anybody available to switch something with me. Somebody who would want to be on KB. My preference would be to stay on Water and Sewer Board, but I have to get that out there because I feel like I'm not doing an adequate job with both of these boards being so close together. So I wanted to float that out there. Do you have any suggestions on that, Mayor, or is there anybody?
I have a question. When did they change the time on that? Because it's always worked in the past.
They didn't change the time, I don't think. Or maybe they did before I started. It was at 5:30 from the beginning, but it used to on the sheet that we looked at, it said 6:30. I think when we were making those appointments.
It's been 6:30 as long as I've been on council, but they must have shifted it sometime in there. I wonder if we can go back to that group and see if they could move it.
I would be happy to do both if they would be willing to move it. What would we need? Should I just?
I guess we would just ask them if they can move the time.
And then if they are not able or willing, then I can come back again.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So everybody needs to think about whether they would add that one in, but we do need 3 on Water and Sewer Board.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that. I will reach out to them and see if they'd be willing to switch to 6:30, and if not, I'll be back about that. But I do want to take a minute to talk about Water and Sewer Board. We had a great discussion again regarding the rates and fees, and we actually did get a good amount of feedback this time from the Water and Sewer Board, which was really helpful to know where they kind of stood on their feeling about the rate and fee. And the piece of feedback we did get on that was they're nervous. At least several of them were nervous about the $15 a month increase that will be happening. A couple of them had suggested ideas about reducing it for the first year or something like that. I'm not sure that's workable, and my personal feeling is to stick with the 15, and that's what I told them. But I did think it was an important enough piece of feedback to share with the rest of council as we're considering those rate increases. My biggest concern, which I shared with them, was that if we only did 5 years, then we would just be behind by that much more, and we'd have to do $20 the next year. I think we're kind of in a rip the Band-Aid off scenario here on the water fees. So that's kind of where I landed on that. But it was helpful to get that in feedback, and I wanted you all to know that as well. In addition to that, we had some discussion regarding water quality. And Director Van Rij talked about the possibility of doing a more one of the programs they'd like to implement would be a higher level model of the system that would allow us to really understand where we had areas in the system where the water stagnated. Because there's kind of an impression that it seems that different areas of town have different quality of water, and they think maybe it's because it's sitting in pipes in different places. So that would be helpful, and also the idea of just testing throughout the city in different areas to compare the water. And then, of course, the best thing we can do to make the water taste better is to upgrade the system over a long period of time with a lot of money. And that was kind of the suggestion for the long-term solution there. And then finally, we had a discussion about the city ditch and well, all of the ditches and that feed into our system or that we have rights to, but specifically we discussed the city ditch. That's one of the 2 ditches that we maintain along with the McBroom ditch. And one little curious aspect of that is that the city ditch continues on past Allen Water Plant. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. Goes through various areas of town, some of it underground, but it the board was interested in more information on how the maintenance is done on that and what we're actually doing to make sure it's well maintained. So that is that was Water and Sewer Board, unless Councilmember Wink has anything to add when it's her turn. But other than that, I have no other report.
Thank you. I think I saw Member Questa's hand up. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, and it hit me. I'll just go back and watch the meeting. But you mentioned that they expressed a concern regarding that increase. I assume that's just the burden of expense. But am I assuming correctly there?
Yeah, for those who would be paying those increased rates, that it would be. And the one thing we have going is we have the CAP program that would reduce that. And also, we're still going to be one of the lowest in the city on our water. I mean, it's going to come as a shock to people, but we're still going to be one of the lower metro or one of the lower cities in terms of the metro area for our water bill. But that was the concern, is that it would be kind of a shock to people who aren't used to paying that much.
Sure. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
I would like to say one more thing. I don't know if it's because of Zoom or what, but I guess I've noticed this in this board and commission for the last year, that they don't necessarily really take up a discussion very much. And so I pushed really, really hard for them to give feedback about the rates, and you'll see that if you watch it. I just think they need to weigh in and tell us, do you really think this is palatable? Do you think we can do this? And then they did back up and start talking about it, and it did generate a really good conversation. But I think they were still behind it to say, yeah, this isn't great. But the financial, the plan for special ability, help financially for those who are lower income, I think they were thankful for that. I'll let Member Wink go on from there. Member Russell is next, but Member Wink, can we wait till your turn, or do you want to?
Just a tiny addition to what you said. We also had a bit of a discussion about what quality really means when we're talking about the quality of water in Englewood, because we're required by law to meet the requirements, to meet certain standards for certain facets of our water, the potable water. And so the water we drink is always of passable quality. So, what does quality mean? And so Mayor Olson brought up the term safety. So, when citizens are talking about poor drinking quality, yes, maybe it doesn't smell amazing or it doesn't taste amazing, but per standards, the quality is being met. It is safe water. So just talked about that distinguishing piece and what it really means in the community, and ensuring that the community knows that our water isn't dangerous. It may smell and taste suboptimally at times, but yeah, that was another part of our conversation, right? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Next is Member Questa. You're next.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have anything outside of a quick board and commission update, and that is regarding historical preservation. We are scheduled to meet Wednesday. We got some feedback from the city attorney regarding the landmark designation that I mentioned that they'd like to bring before council in a study session. I think that we're going to have to meet amongst ourselves again. So I wouldn't say it's imminent that we would need to come before council just yet. We need to work a couple things out based on the attorney's valued guidance. And so just to let you guys know that that's not quite as pressing as maybe I thought it was initially. But we'll meet Wednesday, and then I'll update from there. Thanks, Mayor.
Great. That's really helpful to know. Thank you. Member Russell's next.
Thank you, Mayor. And I actually am going to defer to the next meeting if that's okay. I had two meetings. The NERC board was one of them. We are having another meeting. I believe it is later this week or the first part of next week, because of market conditions, they are going to change something which will impact the budget. And so they wanted to know when the next budget meeting was. So that's why they've scheduled another meeting. So I will have more information on that. The ACE committee also met, and I did not bring that information with me. And so if it's okay, I'll give my report on that at the next meeting.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
All right. Next is Mayor Pro Tem Sierra.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'll start. So ETAG did meet this past Thursday. They only had 4 of the 5 members present, so they did get an update on the trash hauler committee and where they stand. They also, they discussed the traffic code. They were split on the safety stop 2-2, so they're waiting on the 5th member to discuss that aspect of it. They did pass, I believe, the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit aspect of it unanimously. And they did go over the ETAG bylaws, and I believe they voted on that. I don't have notes on that, but I believe they did pass that as well. But nothing other than that. They just went a little bit over the Dartmouth speeding data as well. So those were my notes regarding ETAG this past Thursday. I guess I have a couple of council requests as well for tonight. One, I'm not sure exactly where we finished off with the pesticides in the parks. I recall there being a presentation given by staff on what it would cost if we decided to completely eliminate it, which I believe was about $50,000. And potentially, I believe it might have been additional staff. But also there seemed to be some middle ground as well in terms of just kind of like stair-stepping our way towards doing away with pesticides. So I just want to get an update on where we stand with that and what would be possible next year, especially since we're talking about, about the budget. So I'd like to get an understanding of that. So that's one council request. And then I got a second council request. The owner of the property that sits at 3296 South Washington reached out to me. People may recognize it as just a little grocery store that's right on the corner of Washington and Floyd. Currently, the zoning stipulates that potentially it has to be a grocery store. And so she wants to get that changed. So I guess my council request would be to just understand what the zoning for that property would be. It sounds like the neighborhood would actually like it to change from a grocery shop, or at least provide different options, such as a coffee shop, or maybe even turn it into a place of business, such as an insurance agent. But just want to get a little bit of feedback on what that would, what the current zoning states, and then also understand if there was going to be a change to the zoning, is that something that we can do prior to this whole Title 16 discussion? And just understand that. And so maybe potentially we can kind of fast track this if this is what the neighborhood wants. So those are my 2 council requests. So if you have any questions, City Manager, please let me know.
All right, thank you. Is anybody not in agreement with any of those? It seems like reasonable things. Yep, great. Next person is Member Stone. If you can.
Hey, I'll be real brief. I did not get a chance to partake in the Parks and Rec Commission because of this, but I do know that they restructured the off-leash committee. I read the details. I cannot repeat them back to you right now. I'll have a better update next week for you guys on this. But I did want to thank City Center Dental and Colorado Surgical Arts for the beautiful job they did to my face, but for being really professional and great. And that's both here in Inglewood. I'm really proud of our medical community and healthcare community here in Inglewood. And I just wanted to say that, and I'll have a better update on Parks and Rec next week.
All right, thank you. Next is Member Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing I want to say before I forget is I want to say a huge thanks to Madeline Hinkfuss, Lady Neighborhood Resources of Englewood. So I applied for my neighborhood on Saturday, and it went tremendously well. There weren't too many people, and Madeline had discussed with me beforehand. I asked her about number of people, even though we're outside. I didn't want to create a coronavirus, hotspot, and just really great help in terms of the materials I had, and it was just such a huge success. I'm really grateful we have this program in Englewood. I'm grateful so many citizens are taking part in it. I think once, as long as we can keep managing the distancing, it's a good thing to have for this period of time. Maybe some would disagree with me, but it was just such a great success. I want to just thank City Manager Lewis for putting this program in motion and hiring Ms. Hinkfuss. Just great. And if I can update on boards and commissions next time, that would be also helpful for me, Mayor.
What was that again? What was your last?
If I'm allowed to provide my board and commission update next time.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Next is, yeah, it was me. All right, we're done. All right, our next agenda item then is City Manager's report, and also the the Police Reform Task Force is part of that. And I believe you're going to do COVID in this section too, right?
Yes, that's correct, Mayor, and thank you for allowing that indulgence. Let me just get this report open. Okay, just to start out with the numbers, we have had in Arapahoe County, we went from 7,614 cases to 7,730 cases, which is an increase of 116. We've only increased one death in that time period from the last report. And in Englewood, we've gone from 276 cases to 282 cases, which is an increase of 6. But our death rate has remained steady at 30 individuals. The next thing that I want to cover is some of the business recovery work that we're doing, coordinating with the county. As you know, AdWorks that we participate in, they are having a business conference on August 26th that you all are welcome to attend. And I was notified today that Englewood will be recognized as a leader for, among other communities, for the design and implementation of grant assistance programs related to COVID. So I just want to thank Darren Hollingsworth for his great work, as well as certainly Director Brad Power and Nancy Fenton, who have worked tirelessly to make those programs a success. On August 14th, we had the Arapahoe County Community Resources Department provided an update to us on our rental assistance program. As you may recall, we actually rolled our rental assistance program into the counties because they could offer more money with CARES funding when that became available. And so to date, as of July 31st, on the most recent numbers, we have 92 households have been provided a total of $118,000 in rental assistance. So that program is continuing to see a good deal of usage, and we're glad to have it. I also wanted to report that we've had a couple more nonprofits that have applied for funding. Some of these are not in Englewood. So we are applying and checking everything out with the county before we provide assistance to those nonprofits, and just guaranteeing that the work that they are invoicing us, for instance, or saying that they spent, it has been spent within the city of Englewood. And I want to thank Maria Sabata for her management of that. And then last but not least, well, actually two more. We are also working with the county and have helped select through the good work of Chris Hargath and the communications team. We've helped select a public relations firm that the county really decided to go after in order to provide a more comprehensive messaging system of various health orders, of what we should be doing, even some help with different school districts and what they're going to be doing. So I want to thank our communications team who have participated in the lengthy process and a lot of work for selecting that public relations firm. I think we'll be able to do a better job with our messaging countywide instead of just, individual cities doing their own. And then last but not least, I just wanted to finally report that we have gotten $1.7 million approved in CARES funding. We do have some additional requests into the county, but as of now, we have surpassed the halfway mark in terms of our total allocation from CARES Act. And we hope to continue spending those dollars to really help our businesses, our nonprofit community, and where applicable, our individual residents within Inglewood. So we got to take any questions about the COVID report before moving on to the police report.
Thank you, Manager Lewis. Are there any questions from anyone? Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. I simply want to tell our city manager things are so calm and nicely moving that maybe I want to say it again. Thank you for how you've handled all of this, all of these resources, all the direction, the decisions, but the resources during this COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, I know it's been zillions, it's required zillions of details and research and work on your end to keep everything moving in terms of the different programs and funding and applying for the funding and getting it back. So thank you, Sean. I mean, you've done it without us seeing any of the, the paddling underwater as the duck swims along. So thank you very much for handling it all so nicely.
I appreciate that. And if I could, Mayor, just point out that the city attorney has done a tremendous amount of work. The directors have done a tremendous amount of work, and really the organization at many levels have. So thank you. And I will pass those that gratitude on to them as well.
Okay.
That's great. Also, Manager Lewis, thank you for bringing up the the marketing piece for the county. I think that actually was part of what came out of our meeting last month with the county commissioners, the managers, and the mayors, which we do once every 2 months, and we stepped it up to be now every month, right? Is it every month? Yeah. And so it's been great. The county's working together better. I think we're all finding ways to, kind of not just parade people in and out to tell their story, but actually roll up our sleeves and get some work done. And so I really appreciate the city's picking up on those offers. The second thing I was going to ask you about is the grant that we talked about on Friday. I totally forgot about this in my manager's report or my mayor report, but there's a grant possibility. Are we for $50,000 for the county to actually take a look at recovery processes? Is that something that got followed up, or do you think it will get followed up on?
I have not followed up on that, but I will check in with Michelle Halstead tomorrow and make sure that we do that. Okay.
So one of the questions that I raised on Friday in this group was, we've got time to come out of this. We didn't, it hit us blindsided and we're in it. And now we've got time to think about how do we come out of this better as a recovered city and county. And I think this grant is supposed to help us kind of do that. And I think either Douglas or Adams has already gotten one. So hopefully we can get that too, but thank you for pursuing those. So your second item you have, right? And I'm sure you might have other things too, but.
Actually, no, I'm glad to end my report with this. This is a big item, so I'm glad we're running, hopefully, a little ahead of schedule in your mind so we can spend as much time as needed on this. We have done more refinement on the police reform task force. And so I wanted to just go through the information that's in your packet and tell you kind of some of the refinements that we've made, and then also have spend most of our time talking about the makeup and membership of the committee. So first of all, we really try to focus and narrow down the purpose and desired outcomes into 3 main categories. I think we had 5 before we combined training, hiring, and discipline into one topic because we haven't spent as much time on that. We didn't hear as much from that from either council or the public. So we're proposing to spend only one of the meetings really digging into that, or maybe there's a couple. I have to zoom down before I can see that. And then our second, really a big part of this would take a little more time on use of force policies and procedures. Again, have not had a lot of concerns raised, but I expect that the task force may have some of those. And so we lumped all of those, such as chokeholds, reporting use of force threats between officers, chemical projectiles, de-escalation, all of those will be covered under use of force. And under each of these 3 kind of sections, we're going to review with the task force what we currently do, and then have some time spent on what best practices are with regard to these, and then have our task force really give us feedback on what's missing, what's maybe outdated, inadequate in what we've presented, or doesn't really align with best practices. And then the final and certainly most weighty, I think, or what we anticipate spending the most time on is alternate policing. So we're going to be reviewing the current practices, co-responders, impact team, and a proposed restorative justice program, and then really digging into some of the things that you all have brought up with regard to homeless services, addiction services, mental health services, CAHOOTS / STAR, or maybe and STAR, and then also our 911 call diversion. And again, in each of these sections, we'll look at what we're currently doing, what we could be doing, and get the task force's recommendations on what they think should be doing. So maybe I should just pause and say, are there any questions or concerns? We don't think that varies from what you told us before, but just wanted to let you know how we reorganize that.
Great, thank you. Any feedback, Council? I'm going to assume that means they're in favor.
All right. Well, the big thing that we want to spend time, and by the way, I'm regurgitating the good work of the police department. So between Chief Collins, Interim Commander Chad Reed, Sam Watson, Deputy Chief, Vance, many people within police have been working on this. I'm simply just kind of telling you what we've come up with. The committee formation, as we talked about, city council members would be 2 to 3 representatives. We had 3 volunteers last, so we put those in the report. We did have the police. I asked the police to give recommendations because I think they're uniquely qualified to tell us who from the police force they think should be on this. So you can see that we set aside 4 representatives. It's what you talked about last week. You've got a few more than that here, and so we need to make that decision. And then on stakeholders with regard to kind of our agency partners, I think there was consensus last time to really focus on all health, change the trend, and Swedish. We had originally proposed Kaiser. That fell out after my conversations with individual council members in my one-on-ones. We could certainly put it back in, but I think there was more consensus around a Swedish representative. And then residents, you can see, staff is not making any recommendations on residents. We think that should really come entirely from the council. And so each council member, I think everybody represented or suggested, we had one council member that suggested 3 members, but most folks either recommended 1 or 2. So you can see those there on the list. But if you don't mind, Mayor, if we could start on the police reps, if you have any thoughts on that. We are saying 4 representatives, but with John Collins in the room ex officio and without a vote. So that would be 5 people, but he would not be a voting member.
All right, council, let's give some feedback on each one. Obviously, the first one, the 3 council members, that one's set. I think everybody's good with that. We'll take all 3. Is that okay? Any drawbacks to that? I think it's okay, right? Member Anderson, do you want to?
Oh, I just wanted to thank council for allowing me to volunteer on this as well. I'm really excited to serve and looking forward to serving with members Wink and Stone. So thank you for letting me jump on as well. Appreciate it.
Great. So the second one is the police staff options, 4 reps. I actually would like to go with who the police decided on there and not have any question about it. Just go with the 4 that they suggested and we not mess with their suggestions, and then we focus on our own from the community. But did anybody else have another idea? Okay, Member Russell, I can see your hand. Go ahead.
When you can see my hand, then I have to go back to my other screen.
I know, it's hard on the phone.
Right. So I just have a question. Is there a reason that Chief Collins would be there, even as an ex officio non-voting member?
That's a great question, Councilmember Russell. In my conversations with at least 2 council members, since the conversations of this started, a couple of people said that they would insist on that. However, I think that's certainly a decision of council, not staff.
I think it might be wise and to not have him there. I mean, if he's going to be non-voting and ex officio, I think that it probably would be more objective to not have him there. Not because I don't think that, I just think that I think that one extra person. So anyway, that's all I'm going to share.
Okay, that's fine. Member Anderson, you're next.
I just wanted to affirm your suggestion, Mayor, of appointing the 4 that staff suggested. And I'm also in favor of having Chief Collins as the ex officio member of the task force.
Member Stone.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The original drafts that I saw of this had the I want to say rank, but there had been 2 detectives, and I don't think those detectives are on there now. Is that correct?
That's correct. We wanted to narrow down that list, and so
okay.
I believe maybe it was your comment about thinking that there would be other pertinent staff, and the chief totally agreed with that, and we decided to narrow our list down a bit.
I couldn't remember the names exactly, and I feel like we're not really trying to address what the detectives do. I think they do a great job, and that's not really in the purview. So I just want to make sure that we weren't putting detectives on just because I don't think we're going to be affecting them in any way. I'm with Member Anderson on having the chief there. I was one of the council members who said that I'd like for him to be present.
And I should probably read out those ranks because I apologize, that wasn't.
That'd be great.
Yes, Chad Reed is the interim commander for special operations and codes. Of course, Chief Collins. Leticia Castillo is a police officer, I believe. I don't believe she's a sergeant or higher. Reed McGrath is a sergeant. Shauna Flores Lipa is
detective.
Oh, thank you, John. So we did keep one detective on that list. So
Yeah,
my apologies, John.
I think the logic is that she's been a patrol officer for quite some time in 2 other jurisdictions, and once she's done with the bureau, she'll be back on the street. And so I think that's where you and I left it, and we were going to leave it up to council to decide if they wanted Shauna on or off. But
we thought that choice, would bring some diversity to the recommendations of the police force. Tracy Jones is also in that category, and he is a sergeant and has been an officer for us for many years before that.
All right, Member Wink.
Thanks, Mayor. So you want us to weigh in on the 4 reps?
Yep.
Is that what we're doing?
Yes, and also it's been brought up to not have the chief on, so maybe weigh in on that too.
Okay. I vote for Tracy Jones. Definitely. Leticia Castillo has an interesting background. I kind of like the fact that she was in LA during their rough period of time, and I think offers some interesting perspective there. So I'd vote for definitely Tracy Jones, Castillo, McGrath, and Reed, and I think that the chief should absolutely be there. I think in the way that the chief and his team have been working with us since the word go, I think there's no reason not to have the chief there. I think his intention, his interests, and the way he supports his staff, the way they work together, the way we have all worked with him, says that there's only gain and benefit to be had by having the chief as part of this. So I say absolutely the chief is part of it. So maybe the chief plus 4 is what I would vote for, and the 4 that I named. Is that good?
Yes.
Okay.
So now we have just one person off from what the others suggested. Could I have everyone else weigh in? I suggested the 4 from the staff, and I think Member Stone did, and Member Anderson, and so far I think everybody's in favor. 3 out of 4 maybe in favor of having the chief there. So Member Questa, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. I certainly defer to staff on this one in terms of the best to be there. However, I think that Councilmember Week makes a good point on Officer Castillo. It sounds like that's a very interesting background she had being in LA during those were extremely challenging times, to put it at a minimum. And so she might bring some really good first world perspective on that too. Now, part of me thinks though, then who do you remove if you want to put Officer Castillo on there? My head goes to we just bump it to 5, but maybe that's easier said than done to include Officer Castillo as well. Member Russell, if you don't mind me asking, because I'd like to hear your thoughts on potentially not having the chief there. You know, sometimes I think there's just people think there's a greater honesty when the boss isn't in the room. And, you know, I certainly think the world of this boss. So I'll tell you that right now, Chief Collins. But is that the thought there, Member Russell, that there might be some more frankness if Chief isn't there?
Yes, that really is that there might be more open. I have nothing against Chief Collins. I highly respect him. But that was my thinking.
Sure. You know, to me, I think this is a group that I think that easy for me to say, but I believe that we probably get similar answers, whether or not the chief was present in the room or not. But you know, there's really no way to know that. I don't mind one or the other if the chief is there. I would say this. So the one that I do like potentially including Officer Castillo as well, if we can find a way to do that. But if we go with the 4 of staff, then I'm certainly will move us forward as well. Thanks, Mayor.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Sierra.
Yeah, I'm fine with moving forward with the 4 staff, and then I do want to see Chief Collins there as well.
So the 4 staff that the police suggested?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And Member Stone.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I actually did want to talk about Leticia. I think that she'd be a great addition to this. Similar to Member Questa, I'm not sure where to put her in, who to switch out for her. But I do think that she brings a really interesting and unique perspective, and I'd like to see her on there. And again, I'm sorry, my brain's just not moving as fast as it usually does. We had 1 detective or more than 1 detective right now on here? 1. Okay. And that 1 detective is Shauna. Okay, but I really like Shauna too. I think she's got a really great perspective as well. There goes my my easy out. Yeah, I don't know. I do really want Officer Castillo on there if possible, and I'm open to suggestions on how we make that happen.
All right, Member Wink.
Could we have all 5 then?
I mean, that's one way around it.
I mean, it's a we're talking about police, so I don't think we'll suffer that much by having another police representative there.
We took 3 council members.
Right, that's true. Thank you, Stone.
Yeah, certainly staff doesn't have an opinion on that. We were just going with the numbers that were given to you last week, but we're fine going any direction.
All right, what I'm more concerned about is having too big of a group to work with. I want to also make a recommendation that could add another member to the whole thing. I would like to add a 5th category that I hadn't thought about until I looked this over, and then that would be a content expert that isn't on the police force, but someone who lives in the city, which makes this very, very narrow. So I would love to have Paul Taylor be on this. Maybe it's not a person that sits on the committee, though maybe he's sort of a consultant to it. But this is his field of expertise, and he's one of our own residents. I couldn't believe that when I found that out. And I think he would have the best interest for the city. He's not trying to sell a program. He's not part of anything in particular. So that would add another person if we agreed to that at the end, but I'll just throw that in. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe maybe it's okay to deal with that big of a group. Member Wink.
I think that's a fantastic idea. And I love it that Paul lives here, but he has a broad perspective that's based on a lot of research and sort of engagement on a national level on the topic. not just focused here. Yeah, I do think that's great, but you're not suggesting obviously that he falls under number 2, the police staff options. You're just saying this is another body that would continue to increase the number if we're thinking about increasing that. So
exactly. Yeah.
Mayor, that would be 15 members if you add a police person and keep the 3 residents. So certainly I think that's doable.
Yeah.
Okay. 15 is not that bad. Is everybody okay with that? I guess we can talk about the 5th edition when we get to the next one, but Member Stone.
I mean, 15 is a lot of people, but this is a big issue, you know, and if we want to have all the stakeholders at the table and, you know, really do our due diligence and do a good job, we're going to have to figure out how to manage 15 people in a room, you know, or on Zoom, whatever it is. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're probably right. I think you are right. Anybody else opposed to that as an idea? Keep Letitia on, then add her, and then also add Paul Taylor as a 5th content expert. It would be a 5th category, really.
Or slide him under stakeholder options.
Could be there too. Yeah, could be there too. Member Anderson.
Do we have somebody in mind at Swedish, or are we just holding that option open, hoping someone, or has someone shown interest there, manager?
No, we have not reached out to Swedish yet. We wanted just to confirm, and I would love it if you all had someone that you knew of at Swedish that we could reach out to.
I really think this is an important one. I would love to have someone from there. Maybe the police know who they're working with as a director there under it, but at the new president, we could also ask who would he want to appoint for something like that. All right, so on to stakeholders. Those 3 reps are okay with this Swedish as an option. We'll try and figure out who that is. All right, and then the residents. 3 reps, we said. Member Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. So on behalf of the individuals that I suggested, A and D for David, to be very direct, they're not white males. One is a Latino gentleman and one is an Asian American female, who are citizens and professionals engaged. I think would offer great perspective because of their careers. One is a social work professor at a university nearby, and one is a marketing and advertising executive. I think both actually live in District 1, which wasn't I wasn't trying for just District 1, but they do reside in District 1, and I've gotten interest from Guillermo. I haven't spoken to Amy as yet, however, but those were the reasons I suggested those 2 individuals. And also just to offer perspective that's a little bit different, newer, maybe fresh, to overuse that word, to what we tend to hear when seeking citizen engagement. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Member Wink. Member Anderson.
I appreciate Member Wink putting some thought into the diversity, and I think I certainly would support maybe one of those. But kind of as a process, I want to suggest maybe if we could, have those who suggested multiples, maybe narrow it down to 1 each. So we have one from each of the council members that had suggested different people for the task force, and then kind of narrow it down from there. Would that be possible?
Let's take them one by one.
Okay.
I mean, the reason why I would prefer is I do see a few of these that I think have, that if somebody narrowed it down to 1, I might want to say more about the other. If that's okay. Member Stone.
I was just going to say that I actually really like Member Wink's picks. And the person that I would throw in alongside her too is specifically Nate Anderson, who's a member of our community's LGBTQ individual who has a adopted son who is African American, who has had interactions with our law enforcement. And I think that he brings a pretty unique and personal experience to the table with him. So I'd like to put his name forward as one of the people that I strongly support. But I definitely recognize what Member Wink is saying, and that we need to have, significant diversity on this actual committee as well, this task force. So I'd be supportive of her two picks as well.
Okay. Member Russell, do you want to speak to your two recommendations?
Not really. I think it's pointless.
Wow. Okay. I don't think it's pointless. I know the two that you recommended. I think Donna Jones has been very active, so I would tend to pick her over probably Dominique if we're going to narrow it to one. But and I think Ms. Jones has lots of perspective on things and opinions. I know she'll speak up. So who else on this list? Member Anderson.
I think the just slight concern I'm having right now is that we're going to end up with members Wink, members Anderson, and member Stone choosing the representatives when we're also all sitting on the committee. And so I really would like to hear from members Russell and Cuesta, who have also made suggestions, and would certainly support their suggestions over mine, in all honesty. Just because I think we need diversity in many different ways on this committee, and I think one of that is diversity from the council members that are all coming from different perspectives. So yeah, I would love to hear from members Cuesta and Russell.
Great. I'll go on to, if you don't mind, to Member Cuesta or Member Wink. Do you want to say something first?
I do. Thank you, Mayor. I do also want to copy what you said. I know Donna Jones and her husband really well, and I too, when I saw this list, thought that, obviously I'm going to advocate for my two, but I do believe that Donna would serve really well on this group. So I'm sorry that Member Russell, you should really speak. I think she'd be great. So just want to put that out there. And if I need to minimize my list, I will remove Amy and leave Mr. Sansa on the list if I need to pare that down, but
okay.
I'm willing.
Oh, myself, Mayor?
Yeah.
Very good, thank you. I just have one, Mr. Steve Ward, and I think most folks here have met him. And Steve, to me, his most fundamental quality, and it's why I think he's great at many things that he takes on with city duties, is that he's an honest broker. I think he's one of those guys that he's critiques at times, but always constructive in doing so. He's good at doing research, background. And to me, he's just one of the folks that always comes to mind when we need an honest voice in the room. And I believe he's been through the Inglewood Law Enforcement Academy, the Citizens Academy, as I believe a couple others here as I'm looking at the list have as well. And so I think he has some background on Inglewood policing as it is. I think that he's very up to speed on current events. Now, how could you not be, I guess, with what's going on in the news? But nonetheless, to me, he's just one of those guys. He's an honest broker. He knows Inglewood well. And I think he really knows the functionality of the police thus far. And I think would give a good perspective as well. But, there's good ones on here. And, I guess I don't mind Donna Jones either. I think she's got good perspective and has certainly given me a new frame of reference on things also. So I'm definitely open to the conversation. Diversity is critical, though. I think we just added an officer kind of in the interest of diversity as well. So I don't see why that wouldn't be front of mind with our residents also. Thanks, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to add in here? Mayor Pro Tem Sierra, do you have any?
No, I'm glad for all the discussion around this. It was really hard for me to kind of make a decision on the three, so I was hoping to hear this tonight. I recognize a couple of the names, or I know a few of the names on here, but the rest of them are just basically people that we've heard speak over the last past council meetings. So I think based off of just the discussion tonight, if I was to make a decision, I know Member Wink removed her name, but it probably would be Amy, Guillermo, and Nate Anderson.
Okay. I'd be in favor of those as well. We don't know if Amy's willing to do it though, right? Remember, Wink, you hadn't asked her, but you do think that, did anybody ask any of these folks? Maybe I should just ask that straight out.
Guillermo's a definite yes.
Okay. Member Stone.
I asked all three of mine.
Okay.
Before proposing them.
Okay. Member Anderson.
I really do think we should have either Donna Jones or Steve Ward on there. I think that would bring some appropriate balance in terms of perspective to the task force as well.
What do you think about having 4? Go from 15 to 16, it's probably not going to make that big of a difference.
My only concern there is that we go back to an even number again. But one of the reasons I liked the suggestion of bringing in another person in the form of the professor was that it rounded us out to an odd number again.
You think there's going to be a tie vote?
I think it's highly unlikely, but I certainly don't want to leave it up to chance.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're the ones who are going to vote on anything, right? So it's really just they're going to make some recommendations to us, what gets heard and what doesn't. Member Cuesta, your name was up or your hand was up.
Yeah, voting hadn't even crossed my mind in terms of even or odd. Now, I guess when it comes to the final recommendations, maybe votes could be cast, but up to this point, the numbers hadn't crossed my mind in terms of voting, more just functionality.
Yeah.
But should we be considering voting? Is that an aspect here as well?
I'm not very worried about that. I'm hoping they're going to have some great recommendations, and if they disagree on some things, maybe they'll throw more in rather than take some out. Maybe that's the direction to the 3 of you that are being on it, that if there's a divergent voice, that you include it so we hear it. I don't know. Member Russell, I am concerned that you don't want to chime in on this at all. You don't think that this is a good process, or is there anything more you could lend to that?
I recommended 2 people for a reason. I believe Donna Jones is a very balanced person, very objective, and very well informed and educated on what's going on in the city. That is one reason that I mentioned her. Dominique Cook, I have not talked to her. I believe she would bring a piece to the table and honesty. They have owned a business in this city for decades, and I think that she is very respected. And in working with her a couple years ago, I think that she is objective, but she would be very honest too about things that she sees going on in the city. So if we don't have an intended outcome in the task force, I did recommend both of these people for a specific reason. So that's all I have to say. So thanks.
Okay. Are we opposed to doing 4? It seems like 4 residents actually make sense to me. Our stakeholders are people who don't necessarily live in our city, but they're doing frontline work with interaction with the police that they get to see firsthand a lot of things. And having 4 really different kind of residents might be great. Member Stone.
We've got, I think it's fine. I really do. I don't think it makes much difference at this point if we're going to be at 15 or 16 members. Either way, there's going to be a lot of people sitting at the table, and that means a lot of diverse perspectives and input. And that's what we're looking for, is for diverse perspectives and input so that we can make sure that, we're doing the best we can for our city.
Great. Member Cuesta.
I like having 4. It's the citizens at the end of the day are the group that's policed. If we're going to have 3 council members, we can have 4 citizens, would be my thought. Thanks, Mayor.
Great. So let's go with 4. And then I think we got to figure this out then. It's, we had 3 that have been strongly recommended, and then I think Donna Jones added in with that makes it 4, but those would be Amy, Donna Jones, Guillermo Sands, and Nate Anderson, but it could be Steve Ward. And I would recommend that we have an alternate just in case one of these people says no. Member Anderson.
I never got to throw in a word for Tim Nichols, and maybe he would be a good one for an alternate, just because he has experience both on the homelessness and addiction side, and also a real kind of personal understanding and his own research of policy and use of force kinds of issues. It's kind of a personal commitment to him to understand that stuff. So that's the reason I recommended him. But otherwise, I like the 4 suggestions that we kind of have on the table.
All right. Anybody else? So can I assume that A, C, D, and E are the 4, and then do you want an alternate if someone says no, or do you want to go back to 3, or do you want to add in Tim Nichols or Steve Ward? I've heard people say Steve Ward too. Member Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm actually, well, good with those 4, and if one drops out, we're to 3, okay.
All right, Member Cuesta.
I'd like to have 4 citizens. So I'd like to have those 4 good, and then an alternate as well. And I believe Member Anderson just put Mr. Nichols in there. And I'd put Steve Ward in there too. So I'd say Mr. Nichols or Mr. Ward for the alternative, but the 4 you suggested is the members are good for me.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Sierra, do you care who the alternate is?
No, not especially. So if I was to say a name, I would say Mr. Nichols.
Okay. All right, so and we have a couple that say just keep it at 3. Why don't we do this? If somebody says no, why don't you bring it back to us? Let's see what happens.
Okay. Will do.
Get it down the road a bit.
No, that was very helpful. I think we've got 4, and then with the 2 alternates in the order of Tim Nichols, then Steve Ward. So we'll go with that. That'd be great.
Sounds good.
All right, so we put in your council memo the background documents we plan to send. If you have additional background information that you would like for us to send, please let us know that. And then I did want to let you know that there was one I spoke too soon because I was not able to do the outreach that I had planned for when I put in your memo that we had done outreach to the facilitators. So I'm going to ask the police department to help me with that. But we did identify 3 individuals that we think could be qualified and have had some experience with this. We gave you websites for their firms. And so we were just going to see if you had maybe an order of preference for that. I was able to talk to some of you about this last week. But I don't have my notes in front of me to remember who. One person was removed from the list, but I can't remember, or said that they thought that the other 2 would be better. I think
it was me.
Okay, which
well, actually, so I really liked A and C, and I just thought that B, that B actually didn't have a big track record of facilitating groups. Seemed like a really wonderful person, very engaged in social justice issues. And diversity, but I thought the other 2 looked like they had active professional lives of facilitating tough conversations around policy development. And that's really where I was. If I were to rank those 2, I'd probably go with, maybe Mr. What was his name? Walton first, and maybe Ms. Maris Dixon second. But really, will you interview these people? Is that what you would do, or?
Yes, I mean, we need to see availability, and that's what I had hoped to have. We don't have that at this point, but if you could give us the ranking, that would be very helpful. And if there are people that you think should be on this list that aren't, we're glad to reach out to them as well.
All right, Council, any weighing in on this? Or do you want to leave it up to Manager Lewis and the chief, or the folks to figure this out? Member Stone.
I'm sorry, I must have just blanked out while you were saying that last. What are we talking about right now? Who are we deciding on?
We're talking about the facilitator, so we're going to get a facilitator to help lead these meetings.
Gotcha. Okay.
That allows everybody to participate more freely.
No, I trust Manager Lewis and our staff have done a great job of helping us with facilitators in the past. I trust their judgment.
Okay, great. Any others? Looks like I have a bunch of nods like that. Do you have a preference on anyone? Please speak up. Member Wink.
That gentleman that did our council strategy session, David something 2 times ago in 2018.
Oh, yeah. What was his name? David.
Something OR.
I can get you that information.
Just seemed like a very effective facilitator.
Yeah, he doesn't, he's really good at facilitating conversation rather than talking. But I don't know if he's done facilitation around issues like this. So I can send you his information.
Okay.
I don't know why, I can't remember his last name either. All right, anybody else? I think that means we're gonna leave it up to you, Manager Lewis. We trust you.
Great, and we'll reach out to the individual that Councilmember Wink mentioned. I'll just go ahead and say we won't reach out to Mrs. Medrano, but we will the other 2 plus the one that Councilmember Wink mentioned.
Okay,
and then the last thing that I wanted to just make sure that you saw, this is not a hard and fast schedule, but we did mention the things that we will do now based on your voting and direction to staff about the membership of the committee. It sounds like we're good on the purpose, and you provided some feedback there. We'll go ahead and start the recruitment process. We have gotten a lot of great questions from council, as well as the police department for the Inglewood Police Department. And so at this point, I would recommend that unless people have questions that they think are not good, that we would actually turn all of the questions that we've received so far into a survey, unless you think that it's too long. It is a little lengthy, but I think that, if we really want the opinion of police, I want to get the information that you want to get from them. So I'm fine just turning that whole set of questions that was attached into the survey. And then we'll start sending background documents next week to the task force members that have confirmed. The survey will go out next week to Inglewood Police. And then hopefully, if we have a facilitator that I think and can get scheduling lined up, which may be tricky, we hope to start by the end of the month really having a first task meeting. And so how we've broken this up is really having a task force meeting that you'll have information in advance to review on things like training, hiring, and discipline, that you could review, get a brief presentation on what we currently do, what we could do in terms of best practices, and then end the meeting with a discussion of what we think we should move towards and some recommendations to council. The second meeting would go through the same process, but use of force. We would have 2 meetings for that topic, and then really use the next 2 meetings for the alternate policing. Again, we could add meetings, but we are proposing a meeting a week, which is pretty intense for these members. So we hope you will reach out to your folks, and we'll have to get some contact information from those individuals to reach out, because I think a personal invitation is going to be much more likely to get a yes answer than a staff call from someone that doesn't know them. So your help in forwarding the information, but going ahead and getting those confirmations of your recommendations would be very important. And then last, just really trying to narrow down the process by October, beginning of October. glad to take any feedback on that.
Council, any feedback? I think the timeline looks great. Member Stone should be happy about it. Thanks for taking the lead on
I'm
this.
very happy about that timeline. Excellent timeline.
All right. Well, I'd like to ask Chief Collins if he's got anything to add. I've done too much of the talking, but he and his staff have done just an excellent job of helping keep all this together. And I'd like for him to make any comments he'd like.
No, I really don't have any, Sean. I think it's progressing rapidly, and I think that's the appropriate way to do it. And looking forward to see how this all turns out, quite frankly. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, Manager Lewis, is that it for tonight from you?
Mayor, that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 14 is the City Attorney's report. Do you have anything tonight?
No report this evening.
All right, thank you. Let's vote to adjourn. Could I have make a motion to adjourn this meeting? Could I have a second?
Second.
Great, and let's take a roll call to end.
Member Anderson?
Aye.
Member Cuesta?
Aye.
Member Russell? Mayor Pro Tem Sierra?
Aye.
Member Stone?
Aye.
Member Wink?
Aye.
Mayor Olson?
I think
Six
Member
ayes.
Russell is no longer on. That's why she.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
6 ayes.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good rest of the week.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.